Welcome to a special SABC News broadcast tonight, focusing on the violence plaguing our country, in particular Gauteng. I'm Stephen Curtis. Our show Behind the Violence will be coming to you live from 3 locations in Gauteng tonight. First, Tsepiso Makwetla is live this evening at Constitution Hill.
Stephen, thank you very much indeed. We are at Constitution Hill, just on the steps of the court, and here in the pavement, should I say the courtyard, towards the flame of democracy. What a juxtaposition, Stephen, just as we are a stone throw away from the western parts of Hillbrow, as you know, a densely populated area which is home to many foreign nationals, whom many say are the victim of recent attacks. We'll be speaking to some of them, looking at the reasons behind those attacks.
Tsepiso, thank you. Chriselda Lewis standing by for you tonight at the site of some of the violence we've seen. She's at Gandhi Square in the Johannesburg CBD.
Well, good evening to you, Stephen. Tonight we're also live from the Johannesburg CBD, which has been a scene of violence and looting over the past few weeks. We go behind the violence tonight, not just the attacks on foreign nationals, but we're also looking at some of the other social ills plaguing the country.
Chriselda, thank you. And then in Katlehong tonight at the Tsolo Refugee Centre, Maageketla, Mohlabe.
Of course, these are live visuals at Tsolo Community Hall in Katlehong on Gauteng's East End, where over 250 people that are displaced are actually seeking shelter here. We will be speaking to some of whom actually have lost their loved one during that particular violence here in Katlehong. We'll be also speaking to some that are looking for their loved ones live in Katlehong on Gauteng's East End in a moment.
Maageketla, thank you. Those are my 3 colleagues who are out in different locations for you tonight. Now for your question of the day, what do you believe is behind these violent attacks, the violence and looting that we've seen? Send us your comments to #FullView. You can send us your voice notes or video calls. It's +27 66 479 8056. You can also view any of our interviews and features tonight. Go to sabcnews.com. You can also find us this Monday evening on Facebook and on Twitter. Now, this Monday night, your headlines. Former SABC board chairperson Ben Ngubane tells the Zondo inquiry he had a very limited relationship with the Gupta family. Free State Police arrest a 24-year-old suspect in connection with the murder of a female student in Welkom. And government vows to take every step necessary to protect foreign nationals from violence and harm. Good evening. The former chairman of the SABC board, Dr. Ben Ngubane, has told the Zondo Commission into State Capture that they appointed Gauteng Motsoneng to senior positions because he had good communication skills and could get things done. He also said he knew Motsoneng did not have a matric, that people with qualifications had been unable to make certain things happen. Ngubane was chairman of the SABC board when Motsoneng began his rise to senior management positions at the corporation. Ngubane then became the chairman of Eskom. He's been accused of allowing the Guptas to make money through corruption there. Maageketla Mqunu was back in the Zondo Commission today. Maageketla, good evening to you. What did Ngubane say about why he supported Gauteng Motsoneng so strongly?
Well, of course, I think we heard him sing Gauteng Motsoneng's praises, saying that Gauteng Motsoneng was a hands-on person. He says that, he was seen as, somebody was a troubleshooter, he says, and somebody who used to make things happen. So he says they got Gauteng into the stakeholder relations post in the CEO's office in order to, be the kind of sort of a middleman between the staff as well as management. And he says then he also moved to the board because he was just simply hands-on and is a person that people could relate to. He says Gauteng had people skills, and those were the skills that they needed at the time. And of course he says, despite his qualifications, the fact that he didn't have a matric, he believes that, Gauteng was the right person for the job. Other people simply couldn't do the job that they wanted. Let's take a listen, Stephen.
for the position of Group Executive for Stakeholder Relations was possession of matric not a requirement, and was possession of matric not a requirement for appointment as acting CEO or COO. So I think that's where you might wish to focus.
Yes, Chairperson. We knew it didn't have matric, but we knew that it could deliver what we wanted, and that's what guided us. We know normally you would want to have those qualifications, but when people with those qualifications fail, you then try anything.
So, Mankloba, despite everything that happened, and a lot happened around Hlaudi Motsoeneng, does Ben Ngubane still believe he did the right thing?
Well, certainly. I mean, you can even hear it from his speech when he speaks. You know, he speaks of this young man, you know. He speaks of, you know, this young man who came into the Free State office, you know, and when he wrote the stories that he wrote, he was just simply fantastic. So, you know, from his tone of voice, you can kind of hear that, you know, this is somebody that they were proud of, you know. This is somebody that he believes they made a right decision on. Of course, we know what followed after that, all of the other shenanigans involving Hlaudi Motsoeneng, but I still think that, you know, from the tone that he presented at State Capture Commission, he still does believe that him and Hlaudi, as they've expressed before during that inquiry in 2017 in Parliament, that they really did save the SABC.
Okay, in the middle of all of this with the New Age breakfast, now this was a deal, as I understand it, where the SABC seemed to put up all the facilities, and yet the New Age seemed to get most of the revenue. How does he defend that deal?
In fact, they got all of the revenue, which is about 20 million rand. We know that for a fact. That was part of the evidence that we had last week. Of course, he says at the time when they signed that partnership, of course, you know, they just wanted something, some sort of content for news, which they say they wanted to attract viewers, more viewers from it. And they believe that this was the right platform which, you know, could relate to many people because it brought government to the people. But he says, you know, they believe that this was a worthwhile venture because it simply upped their revenue. In terms of advertising, they saw an increase in advertising revenue. And of course, we do know that, you know, others that gave testimony last week, the CFO, were speaking otherwise, saying that the SABC lost about to the tune of millions from this particular deal. But interestingly, Stephen, we also got the same question being asked to him about his relationship with the Guptas and whether or not he had anything to do with this deal with regards to the TNA deal that, you know, the SABC had undertaken with the New Age. And let's take a listen to what he had to say about this.
There was this business partnership for morning breakfasts. I attended those breakfasts, not all of them, but quite a lot of them. And I would sit with the people in the New Age, editors, members of the Gupta family. And on a few occasions, I went to social events at their home. And that is really the exposure I had to that family.
Yes. Were you, just as the start of the New Age newspaper, were you involved at all? Did you assist with the negotiations of the New Age deal and the TNA breakfast?
No, this was an initiative through our news.
All right, so tomorrow, that's Ben Ngubane testifying today, Dr. Ben Ngubane, I should say. Tomorrow, Mankloba, who's going to be on the stand?
Well, of course, we expect to hear from the man himself, the man who's been, you know, fingered in so many of those controversial decisions at the SABC. We heard from the SABC 8 about allegations of his interference in the newsroom and instructions that he had given to the effect that, you know, to protect the former president and so forth. You know, so we expect to hear from him and to answer on those allegations, the serious allegations, and of course to answer very critical questions about the TNA deal and some of those, you know, controversies that surrounded his term as COO of the SABC.
Mankloba, thanks very much indeed. Do appreciate it. Our reporter, Mankloba Mkunu, in the Zondo Commission for you. In other news today, Free State Police have made a breakthrough in the case of a female student whom they suspect was strangled to death at Allen Ridge near Welkom. A 24-year-old suspect is now in police custody in connection with the murder of the Goldfields TVET College student.
Goldfields TVET College has been hunting ground for women killers this year. In May this year, a bent body of a 21-year-old Naledi Litoba was found in an open field in Welkom. Now another student, a 23-year-old woman, is the latest victim. In reaction, the South African National Civic Organization in the Free State led a demonstration to pledge solidarity with the victims of gender-based violence.
We are going to go to wards, we are going to go to churches, we are going to go to NGOs, we are going to go to all formations and say to them, let's help our government. How can we resolve this problem? What is it that we are saying?
Police say while they have a suspect in this latest case, investigations are still continuing.
As the police were summoned to a scene of crime, they found the body of a woman on the veranda and with scratch marks on her face as well as neck. Seemingly, she was strangled. But we do not know the details of the case up until now. But I must say that a 24-year-old suspect has been arrested.
Meanwhile, the ANC Women's League held another march in Bloemfontein. The league called for harsh measures against perpetrators.
To deliver the message to President Ramaphosa, that sentence must come back. We want to remind him at the NGC of the ANC, as the Women's League, we did utter these words. We are reiterating that President Ramaphosa go back to Parliament and come up with a decision that death sentence must come.
Free State Police have in the meantime urged TVET and university students to report incidents of gender-based violence. Earlier, students at the University of the Free State blamed police and the university management for failing to take actions against perpetrators. Aphumelele Mdlalane, SABC News, welcome.
Well, our reporter covering that ANC Women's League march for us, Tsepiso Makwetla, part of our team there on the line now from Bloemfontein. Tsepiso, good evening to you. How was this march? What actually happened there today?
Good evening, Stephen. We're coming to you live from Bloemfontein. Yes, today in the Free State we had two events to sort of a challenge or fight the gender-based violence. We're looking at women here, we're looking at children. In Welkom, the South African National Civic Organization, SANCO, organized the event there. They picketed in the CBD there in Welkom, and also here in Bloemfontein, the African National Congress Women's League, led by Mayor Olimlamlelu, who's the chairperson here in the Free State, also organized the event to sort of make a noise about this the scourge that is currently crippling our country. You remember that on Friday here in the Free State, at the University of the Free State, students there, especially female students, they organized their event after various incidents were sort of reported where they were harassed, they were intimidated. Some of them, this coming weekend, on Saturday, one of them was even stabbed with a bottle on her eye. So it's a problem currently, Stephen, and women are worried. They are saying that they are looking for protection from the South African police services. They are looking for, when you talk about the students there at the University of the Free State, they are looking for protection from the management. And also in Welkom, TVET College, as we mentioned, we've heard from our package there, students there are living in fear, female students. In May, you would remember that Naledi Lutoba was also allegedly murdered by her boyfriend. So currently in the Free State, it is a problem, especially at this TVET colleges and the University of the Free State. But currently now I've got a male artist who's going to be talking to us about the issues. How is it affecting them as males? Ntate, thanks for your time. We've seen a lot of marches, picketing, women saying that enough is enough. We want to know, how do you feel as a male artist, as male in South Africa, as a man in South Africa, regarding this thing of gender-based violence?
My name is Tsolo Matalajwe. I'm the member of Twin Cyber DJs here in Free State. What I can say about this is that everyone in this world is having its own rights to live. No one should be hurt or something. For us as men and artists all over, I believe we can be united and help each other by making a song that's going to trend all over as awareness of women and children violence.
Earlier on, you were talking about the death penalty. You were saying that you don't believe that, you don't want the death penalty to be reinstated because some people will be accused mistakenly so. How do you feel when a death penalty?
Death penalty, I believe it must not be back because we as people, we don't have to judge each other. The only person who must judge everyone is only God.
So what can you say there to the police? Because these women who have been harassed, we're talking about students here who have been killed, who are being intimidated at our colleges and universities. What would be your message out there to the management of the institutions and also the police?
Now I believe we as people, we can work hand in hand with all the police and people of our communities just to help everyone to be safe out there.
Are you affected as men when women are being killed?
I'm very, very affected because even when I have to invite, when I have to make the event or invite women, they are afraid to come to the event and it affects our work also.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. That Chriselda Lewis there, one of the hip hop or the house artists here, saying that they are also affected as men, Stephen. As we mentioned earlier on, 2 marches today, 2 picketings were organized today. We've heard from Mayor Olimlamleli saying that they are going to they use the General Council to say to the president they want the death penalty to be reinstated so that to solve the issue of this gender-based violence. Stephen?
Tsepiso Makwetla in Bloemfontein tonight. Thank you very much indeed for that. Pretoria is taking every measure to protect foreigners from harm. That's the assurance given to ambassadors from African countries by the Minister of International Relations, Dr. Naledi Pandor. She says it's vital to create safety and security for foreign missions and their nationals. She met with foreign envoys in Pretoria today. In the last week, xenophobic attacks have left 12 people dead.
As violence resurges, Pandor met her African counterparts in Pretoria. Parts of Gauteng have been under siege due to ongoing violence against foreigners.
I got a sense that there's a commitment to South Africa by the ambassadors and their countries. They would like to work with our country to assist us in addressing what I indicated as a very complex set of socio-economic issues because they relate to migration, to immigration, to economic opportunity, to effective administration of all those areas, and also to community antipathy that we need to address through building greater social cohesion within communities.
Pandor says some of the unfortunate comments made by prominent figures on social media exacerbate the situation. She has appealed for responsible behavior.
They mention political leaders who make statements that cause animosity and that are not helpful in a situation such as this one. I indicated to them that I will share with colleagues in all levels of government that all of us need to desist from any form of public comment or private comment that contributes to increased tension and feelings of anger and animosity.
The Dean of Ambassadors in South Africa described Pandor as a practical minister. He says they equally have a role to play.
South Africa is taking sufficient steps, but South Africa alone will not be able to solve their problems. That's why we have to come together as Africans, because we all have a role to play. We had to educate our own communities as a diplomat, as ambassadors and high commission. South Africa also had to play its part, so we had to come together.
The minister says the South African embassy in Nigeria, which was closed indefinitely, will reopen soon. Karabo Masombuga, SABC News, Pretoria.
Well, Karabo Masombuga is our reporter, was at that meeting, and she's with us now from Pretoria. Karabo, good evening to you. What did the minister say to these ambassadors from countries around Africa?
Good evening, Stephen. Good evening to the viewers as well. The Minister of International Relations, Naledi Pandor, has offered to reconvene a committee of the South African government and the diplomatic community, especially the African communities, in order to tackle issues of safety and security, getting security apparatus involved to prevent these attacks from happening. She has assured the ambassadors that the government is doing all that it can to try and eradicate this problem, to try and stop these attacks from happening. And the ambassadors, the Dean of Ambassadors, Mr. Ben Mboko, said that although the minister has called on this meeting, it is also important for them as the counterparts to embark on this on these strategies to solve these matters. He said that this is not a matter facing South Africa alone, but it affects them as well as African ambassadors. So they will try by all means to support South African government and see how they go forward in solving and tackling this issue of xenophobic attacks.
Karabo, what does our Minister of International Relations, Dr. Pandor, what does she blame this violence on? What does she say is responsible for it? What does she say is responsible for this violence? Why are we seeing this violence? What does Dr. Pandor think is causing the attacks that we've seen?
Oh, Stephen, although she did not dwell much on that, we remember that these attacks started 2 weeks ago in Pretoria when there was a taxi driver who was shot after trying to prevent a foreign national from selling drugs to one of South African locals. So when the foreign national retaliated to that, and that was what caused these whole attacks. And since then, people have been on their feet. Taxi drivers last week were on this matter, trying to solve it, asking for the government to please assist and stop illegal dealings, stop foreign officials from doing illegal dealings in the country, in South Africa. And we remember that now the death toll has risen to 12. And yeah, a lot of cities and towns are being affected in Gauteng by these attacks.
Karabo Masambuka, our reporter in Tshwane tonight. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's go to one of our 3 live locations tonight. Constitution Hill, the site of Johannesburg's notorious Old Fort Prison Complex, commonly known as Number 4. Tsepiso Makwetla is standing by for you there.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Indeed, we are right in front of the courthouse doors, those beautiful wooden doors which lead out into the courtyard, and further to my left, about 10 steps away. In the midst of this darkness, what you'd see is a burning flame, which is the flame of democracy, built, of course, in 2011 in celebration of South Africa's constitution, our legal instrument for our existence as a new democratic order. And this, of course, not very far from the western area of Hillbrow, which is a very densely populated area with high levels of unemployment, crime and prostitution, built in the 1970s for specifically whites only, is what the apartheid government said. But now it is home to many migrants, so whether it is migrants who are internally from townships, from rural areas, and of course home to many African brothers and sisters, which has raised the alarm that these would be the subject of attacks. But of course, as we know, of those 12 people who died and over 300 arrests, there have been some South African casualties, which is why we are here to look at this melting pot of residential area, which is called Hillbrow. And of course, there are many others in the surrounds. We're talking about Braamfontein, the inner city. Talking now to one of the business owners who has had her business attacked. She is Lufi Koza. She is an entrepreneur. She tells us about her business with her. Patricia Maseta is her business strategist. Let's start with you, Lufi. So you have an African print shop, which is just about 3.5 kilometers away in the Maboneng district. many people identifying with this as a new, vibrant Gauteng, certainly not the scene of violent attacks. So tell us what happened to you.
Okay, well, yesterday I was here in town when I received a call from one of my employees informing me about what was happening in town, in Maboneng to be precise. And I had to rush there because I was told all our businesses were being looted So I rushed there, and I was there within 10 minutes actually after receiving the call. When I got there, I thought probably I would salvage something from my store, only to my surprise, the store was actually empty. They took everything that was inside. I could only save the chair and the computer. That's all I could get from my store.
Were you able to establish who was behind the attacks? Were your employees able to identify the criminals?
My employees were not there. I had to rush there and actually call my brothers to come so that they can be around me. But otherwise, we've lost everything, and there was nothing that my brothers could actually even help me with.
So you spoke about your various businesses. Was this just the shop at this stage, or did it also happen at your other businesses?
No, it was only the Maboneng store. The other store, which is at Fashion District in town, at Corner President in Troy, we had to rush there and actually just take everything that we could get hold of, because now they were around town as well. So we had to save the stock in the other store. The factory is not affected as for now, yes, because we don't know what to expect next.
So tell me, why do you think that your store was attacked? And I know it's speculation, but hearing anything on the ground, do you think is because you sell African print material? That is the most obvious question, I suppose, that one would ask.
It's actually funny enough you saying that. A lot of people, when they look at the brand Refugee and see the type of clothing that I make, they assume that I'm actually a foreigner, and I'm a fellow South African. I just love this type of material, hence I chose to actually work with this type of material. But I'm a fellow South African who has employed other South Africans, so yes.
So let's crunch those numbers. Have you been able to calculate what the loss to the business has been, Patricia?
Yes, we have. In the Maboneng store, we've got a box called exclusive box. That box alone cost around 50,000 besides the other stock that is sitting in there. And when you look at the one which is in town, we also had to take out the stock. Therefore, there was around 200,000 on that store, and including the exclusive box plus the 100,000 that was on the floor. So you're looking at around 350 loss of sales that we could have made. And we're not even talking to taking it into cost of sales. If we were to talk cost of sales, then we have lost quite a lot. In this business, I think you would appreciate the fact that we start making money out of volume. You don't make money from one dress. You start making money probably at dress number 45. So if you look at the number of dresses that we have lost, you'll notice that we actually maybe have lost around 3 months of the cost that we could have made of the business and advance it in terms of revenue. So there's quite a lot of loss. I mean, I cried myself when I saw the pictures. A lot of people who know that I work at Refugee as their business strategist, they had to call me, some were sending me pictures, and I had to go down there and check on myself to say, is it really happening? And quite frankly, right now, we can quantify the loss of only what we have to around 350, but we still do not know in terms of how far is it going to get.
Have you calculated damage to property?
In terms of the property, we haven't went into that line, calculating the damage to the property, but to remember in a store you have aisles and stuff. Those ones we can quantify right now, because when we were opening the shop, it cost us around 106. So, and everything that is in there that was only salvaged was the 2 chairs, which costed around 5,000. So you can imagine almost what we have lost in terms of the aisles, the shop fittings and all. If you take those costs, originally it was 106, and we could only manage to salvage a 5,000 out of that 106. So it's like 101 is all lost.
Okay. So I'd like to hear from you, Luffy, what life has been like. How long has the business been running, for instance?
Refugee has been operating since 2016, August. And yes, in a period of about 3 years, we've managed to employ just over 30 people. And we believe we're actually making an impact in South Africa.
So tell me about your relationships with the shops around you. Maboneng does have a lot of foreign-owned shops and a very diverse offering in terms of the businesses as well. As a community, what is that like? Is there much interaction?
I'll speak about the block where I'm trading. There's not many foreign owners. Basically, yesterday, as from one owner to another, we're just speaking amongst ourselves, and we're saying, this is a fellow South African doing this to another South African. And as those people were walking up and down because they were still in the area, we did mention that we are fellow South Africans, and why are you doing this? And they responded by saying, we don't care, and we will show you what vandalism is. So this obviously shows you that it has nothing to do with xenophobia or anything like that related to that. It's actually just a country that is angry and hungry at the same time.
So you are echoing the sentiments that have been emphasized many times, that there is more criminality than there is fear or hatred of foreigners. But I want to ask this question, and I thought as I was asking you and you were answering that we often talk, when we say foreign-owned shops, we're looking at African-owned shops. We don't talk in the broad sense of including European, Asian, etc. owners.
Yes. To me, a fellow African is, I just look at them equally as just me, because now you have to look at the South Africans that are actually owning businesses outside. When you actually convert these things, we are doing an exchange. Now, butter is very good in business. We exchange goods for goods. And to me, it's a person who's trying to help me and I'm also trying to help them. So there's no difference to me. And we're just trying to help each other. There's also foreign, like they say, foreign employers who have employed South Africans. They are actually bringing a positive change towards our country as well. So yes.
So Patricia, I'm actually thinking as we're talking now that everybody is looking hopefully at the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, saying that it's going to make the exchange of goods and services easier, cheaper. Just from a business perspective, do you see that happening now with the level of distrust that we're seeing, the vandalism, which is not necessarily aimed at foreign nationals, as some would like us to believe, as Luffy has just told us, but it is disruption of the economic participation of people at large?
I'd agree fully with you there, and let's maybe just take it back a little bit on what Luffy is doing. She's doing African print. So some of the things, the garment that we are doing, we're getting them from Africa as well. So in terms of trade, that would really impact us, and people are angry. But given what Luffy is saying, I think a whole lot of what we're going through right now as a country, the unemployment and everything, it's probably an anger that's coming from, I'm a youth myself who's faced with a lot of people coming to me looking for a job, and at some point I can only help half or so. And if you look at free trade, us trading with other Africans, how are they going to look at us in the near future? That it also going to affect businesses like Luffy's one, which is bringing a business like mine in. There is no Maseto Solution Groups without Luffy D. Luffy D trades, I do their book, I give them a strategy. So if Luffy D goes, automatically I go. So if you look,
and I think that's a great note.
Impact on all of us.
Thank you very much, Patricia, Maseta, and Luffy, because just speaking to us about the brotherhood that we have been preaching about as Africans, and how umuntu ngabantu, as they say, that we as Africans, if we want to build a better Africa, need to work together. And of course, we'll be looking at this this issue around attacks against foreigners from different angles, from a diplomatic angle, from a political angle. We'll also be talking really about the etymology of the word xenophobia. Where does it come from? What informs it? And in these particular attacks, where do we need to zero in to stem these attacks? So you watch SABC News Channel special live broadcast looking at these attacks from 3 different locations. We are at Constitution Hill.
The ANC-NEC revealed in a statement that they supported the user pay system.
So are you saying that motorists, Gauteng motorists, have to pay for e-tolls?
It is a principle that is raised. We are saying that we support the principle of user pay.
We imported a lot of technology as an example in order to invest here, and those people are not going to say, listen, you don't have to pay me back. They are demanding their money back.
SANRAL has another 19,000 kilometers of non-toll.
Welcome to The Bottom Line, a wrap of the business news of the day. I'm Frances Hurd, and we continue to focus on the xenophobic attacks. And of course, the repercussions for business could go far and wide here, even affecting investment, as the attacks on foreign-owned businesses in the city of Johannesburg flare up now and then. But let's start closer to home. It is unclear how they will impact on this economic hub in Johannesburg. As Diabo Seto reports, foreign business owners are unsure of their future prospects.
Johannesburg is the largest single metropolitan contributor to the national economic product. The city's contribution to the national economy is almost 16%, while it is 40% to the Gauteng province.
Every day, Africans arrive to the economic hub that is Johannesburg. With them, they bring hope that this country would present better opportunities than what they would have left back home.
When we come here, we just come to work, not to do anything else, because it's not easy to get to be like in our home. It's too much problem. Then you can't survive that.
I came to South Africa 2012, which is almost 7 years now. I actually came for a visit, but when I came, I found the country so lovely. It was very peaceful, so I decided to set up a business.
Over the past couple of days, foreign-owned businesses have been the target during the violence that broke out. Think tanks and commentators are divided on whether the attacks are being driven by pure lawlessness or xenophobia. Since then, businesses have been forced to shut down, fearing for their safety, and the result, a compromised economic activity in the city.
We condemn any action against legitimate businesses. But we call on foreign nationals to be able to point out those few individuals who are operating illegal businesses in the country.
Local businesses have previously bemoaned the infiltration of foreign shops in the city. They feel the local playing field is not level. But For businesses to remain in the game, that is in the hands of the consumer. They decide where they want to spend their money.
We just want to give them nice things and fair things for their respect. We don't want to fight with them. We want to stay nice with them. We respecting each other, things like that.
As an individual, you might not be able to afford the full lorry of a goods, but when these people team up together, they can afford and buy it, and they can sell it even at a cheaper rate than every other big shop out there.
Soweto Business Access says if local government plans are anything to go by, local businesses will be stimulated, enabling them to compete fairly.
We will be launching a collective buying program called RRK, Reka Rekisa Kasi, which wants to make sure that we mobilize all the buying power, not only of small businesses, but also of government, so that through that information, we are then able to talk to manufacturing of products in the township.
With uncertainty and fear still palpable, Felix and Rafik say should the attacks intensify, they'll be forced to withdraw from participating and contributing to the local economy. And as bad as things may be back home, they'll be left with no choice but to pack their bags and hit the road. Diabosito, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, moving away from the attacks, some other business news today. Old Mutual's on again CEO Peter Moyo returned to work this morning only to find that he was barred from entering the building. Today was meant to be his first day back after he was reinstated by the South Gauteng High Court on Friday. This after the insurance giant fired Moyo for a second time last month.
Old Mutual CEO Peter Moyo was denied entry into the building when he tried to report for work this morning. This was after the South Gauteng High Court had ruled in his favor yet again, reinstating him as Old Mutual CEO. Moyo says the insurer's head of security informed him that he was not allowed into the building. The now reinstated CEO was suspended in June and later fired over an alleged conflict of interest regarding his company NMT Capital, in which Old Mutual also owns shares. Old Mutual says the breakdown in relationship is a result of NMT's failure to timeously pay out preferred dividend.
As early as Friday, in fact, interestingly, before even the court proceedings were finished, we became aware that Old Mutual had already issued a statement to say, I'll not be going to the office. And then it actually begs the question, why actually we were in court? And so we obviously, disregarded that. And yesterday they started actually sending letters to that effect. And my legal team sent a note to say, we will be at work.
Moyo was fired again last month following a ruling which declared his initial axing unlawful and ordered Old Mutual to reinstate him on a temporary basis. This was until his lawyers had launched Part B of his application, which was to have the entire Old Mutual board declared delinquent. Moyo's attorney Eric Mabuza says they will be going ahead with Part B.
We're working as speedily as possible to finalize it, but because of these side scheme issues, we've not been able to finalize that. Had Mr. Moyo gone straight to work, I can assure you that application would have been finalized. But we're working to finalize it. We will let the media know once we've issued the papers in court. But what is certainly clear is that this kind of situation should never be allowed in this country, where people can take the law into their own hands. However big or important they think they may be, everyone is bound by one common goal: to respect the decisions of the court.
Mabuza has reiterated that Old Mutual is in contempt of court. Balentle Mthethwa, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, let's take a look at the markets. And I can tell you, despite the xenophobic attacks, concern about investment, the rand hitting a fresh one-month high today. And this is mainly due to the global environment in which we're operating. This time, it's not about good economic growth or trade talks between the US and China. It's in fact because there are concerns about the global economy, and that has raised suspicions that big economies will stimulate stimulate their economies more. That means interest rates could come down across the world, hard in some parts of the world, but it's good for us with our relatively higher interest rates. That pushed up the rand, the JSE slightly lower. Let's take a look at your main financial indicators. All right, that was the bottom line, a wrap of the business news of the day. Up next, sporting action, and then we continue with our special coverage from across parts of Johannesburg following yet more attacks. From me, good night.
Welcome back to our special broadcast Behind the Violence, examining the situation regarding the violence and the looting over the last few days, primarily in Gauteng and what's behind it. One of the sectors of our society that's been hugely affected by what we've seen over the last few days is our sporting society and, of course, the people who play sport, but also two of the friendlies involving Bafana Bafana were cancelled and there are possible ramifications for other parts of football primarily as well. Here to discuss this with us is the person who brings you sport on a regular basis, Simon Burke. Simon, good evening.
Thanks, Stephen.
Okay, firstly, the two friendlies. Well, one was supposed to be against Madagascar. They cancelled. We had Zambia cancelled. It seems to have been a very difficult situation, a difficult weekend for Bafana.
Yeah, we think that Zambia was a political move, and it was done during an international friendly window, so it wasn't a FIFA-sanctioned event, it wasn't CAF-sanctioned. There was the freedom to make a statement, and that's what they did. We were meant to play in Lusaka, and Zambia said no, because of the violence in South Africa, we can't go ahead with this. That was the statement made by the Zambian FA. Then Madagascar came in and said, yes, we can help. We looked around and then at the 0 hour they pulled out and said, look, we can't ensure the safety of our officials coming to South Africa. But more importantly, it was what Zambia did to us, and that's left us scrambling, and that's left our new coach without a game to play. The October window's coming up, and still they haven't got any opposition to play against in an international friendly environment.
Okay, and then obviously the PSL is going to be affected by this as well. I mean, football, particularly for us, is a hugely international game.
We don't have any reason to believe that it will. I mean, it's never happened in South African domestic league football, any sort of xenophobia. Justin Shonga plays for Orlando Pirates. Karma Billiard plays for Kaizer Chiefs. Those two players have never experienced that from a South African crowd. If any criticism is levelled in their way, it's to do with their form and not to do with where they come from. And they've never been told to go home. We have a Nigerian playing for Kaizer Chiefs in goal, Daniel Akpai. We don't expect, we don't anticipate that anything like this will happen to them. Well, then we also have 3 teams playing in African Cup competitions, and TS Galaxy are playing against a Madagascan side. So we will be looking out to see, will there be a reaction in the crowd to what Madagascar did to SAFA? But we don't anticipate. Largely, there has never been any strains of xenophobia in the terraces. The violence that's played out on the, you know, when the crowd trouble has happened, that's more to do with the anger of the fans directed at the team and where they're going at the time.
Simon Burke, thanks very much indeed. All right, our special broadcast continues tonight behind the violence. Let's now go to Maageketla Mohlabe, who's in Katlehong at the Tsolo Refugee Centre for us tonight. Maageketla? All right, we are expecting Maageketla to be with us in just a moment. Maageketla, I know you're standing by for us at that Tsolo Refugee Centre in Katlehong tonight. I think we are able to hear you, but unable to see you at this stage. We were able to see you a little earlier, but he is at a place where people have sought refuge after the violence. Maageketla, if you're able to hear me, if you're able to explain to us what's happening in Katlehong tonight. All right, stay with us. We'll go there. We'll go to Chriselda Lewis, who's standing by in Gandhi Square as well. But first, your weather.
Good evening from Johannesburg. Let's have a look at your weather details for the next couple of days. For tonight, clear skies over the central parts of the country. Those southeasters up to 20 kilometres an hour around the Cape Coast, with partly cloudy conditions over the southwestern Cape and all along the south coast of the province. Into tomorrow, we do expect bergwind conditions, offshore flow, just driving temperatures up, hot, dry and windy conditions over the central parts of the western half, with clear skies dominating towards the northeast as well. Still a little bit of onshore flow, moisture feeding in, partly cloudy conditions all along the coast, clear skies up along the eastern escarpment, some fog patches in the early morning hours along the west coast. Overnight temperatures dropping to single figures over the central and the northern parts, 8 for Johannesburg, dropping to 4 in Bloemfontein, cold night in Kimberley as well, with mild weather along the coast, 15 Richards Bay, 13 in Port St John's, 14 in PE, Cape Town dropping to 12 and 4 degrees for Sutherland, Uppington 12, reaching a hot 33 tomorrow. Remember those bergwind conditions I mentioned earlier, as we can see temperatures up into the low 30s across the central interior. 29 for Kimberley, Johannesburg peaking at 27, 30 for Musina, Durban 26 and a mild 23 in Cape Town, 31 in Calvinia. Quick look at Wednesday, cold front moving in, wet weather ahead of the cold front, cloudy conditions along the coast, warm weather, once again those bergwind conditions over the central parts, cooler weather over the eastern Cape, hot in the far northeast, and then on to Thursday, second cold front just backing in, cold, wet and windy conditions behind the cold front, cool weather for the central parts and hot weather in the far northeast. And that's it from me. Have a great one. Cheers.
Our special broadcast Behind the Violence continues. We go now to Maageketla Mohlabe, standing by in Katlehong.
To you, Stephen, live at Tsolo Community Hall in Katlehong, where over 250 people that have been displaced following that violence in Johannesburg are actually seeking shelter. And of course, as you can see, young and old definitely here trying to seek refugee in order to avoid the tension that's been simmering throughout Johannesburg as well as surrounding areas. We are told that the total number of people that were displaced ever ever since the start of last week. It's over 800 of them. So many of them that use here are from Zimbabwe as well as Malawi. I'm told that some of them, of course, lost their loved ones during that particular violence. We know that in Katlehong, at least 2 people were killed during that particular violence. I also understand that some are also looking for their loved ones. They can't find them. And obviously, getting into this particular hall here, you see faces wearing pain, anguish, anxiety. And of course, it's a call from them saying that, what did we do to deserve this? And I'm going to speak to those that are able to speak to us, because speaking to some of them here, you could sense tension and saying that they really plead with us not to speak to them. But few, of course, decided to speak to us. And one of them, I can see you have your child here, Peter. Yes. Just tell me, how come you are here?
That is not good, sir, because those guys, they're banning our stuff, they're banning the documents for the cars, they ban the documents for the passport. How could you go home without passport? And to renew the passport is very expensive. We don't have that money. We are suffering here. We don't have a cloth. Only this cloth is remaining, and it's very swollen. So I don't know what someone must do. So those people are suffering here. I don't know what we can do now, because we are suffering right now. So that's why I can give the speech to the ABC.
But tell me, I mean, you being here, how has it been like? I mean, I'm sure when you arrived in the country, and that's a question that I want to know, when did you arrive in the country and what was your purpose? Have you actually found that purpose useful for you and your family?
I arrived here in South Africa 2012. It was nice and was stay nice with the people. We was not fighting. I go back home, I come back again. So those guys, they start to say, xenophobia and what, they start beating us, banning us. 2 people already killed, and other people, they're even missing. We don't know even where they are, run away, or they're banning already. We don't know what's happening. So we're already confused. What must do?
I mean, you were emotional earlier on when you told me about the confusion and frustration that is here, more especially looking at your family sleeping in this hall, something that you're not used to for a long time.
Yes. You can see my son here. It's not even bathing. On 1 week, he's not bathing. So he's not eating nice. Should be what the way was eating before, was eating nice food. Now he's eating food from this side. He's supposed to enjoy in the house. Now he's not enjoying anymore. And that they are taking our people's stuff. They are burning the things. Check my son. It's only this is remaining. And he's even smearing because it's not bathing as should be bathed before. That's what I'm crying for.
But do you have any plans to go back home? And if so, what is the situation that you really hope for going back home? What do you think you're going to find back home?
I wish if someone help me to go home with my family, I can go home to my family. Mara. Now to go home, they want a passport on the bus to go home. If you don't have, I have to pay a lot of money because I have 3 kids right here with their mother sitting right here. So I don't have money to go to Zimbabwe because they want a passport, the drivers. If I don't have passport on the border, to cross border to go to Zimbabwe, they really need serious money, and I don't have that money. Because now the job is already is finished because I'm not working. Where can I sleep after work? I cannot sleep at work. That's what's my issues.
All right. Thanks so much for your time. Of course, Stephen, that's the voice that actually speaks for almost everyone that's here. It's a voice that carries frustration, a voice that carries pain. And of course, many of them saying that they're really not sure if their loved ones are still alive out there. And of course, others saying that they are even scared to get out of this particular hall because they don't know if they will come back with their lives. But for now, let's just go to a short break. We'll bring you more after it.
The SABC
Good evening and welcome to a special SABC News broadcast focusing on the violence plaguing our country, in particular in Gauteng. I'm Stephen Grooters. Our show Behind the Violence is coming live to you tonight from 3 separate locations across Gauteng. Firstly, Tsepiso Makwetla is live this evening at Constitution Hill.
Thank you, Stephen. And we are coming to you live from Constitution Hill. Just to my right, as you can see, right behind me there, it's a flame of democracy, a constant reminder of the freedom to exist, the freedom to live outside of oppression, and the freedom, of course, to expression that South Africans enjoy. But not far from here, just a couple of 100 meters away, are residents of Hillbrow, some in the inner city of Johannesburg, who feel they are not allowed the freedom to enjoy those rights, the freedom to dignity. Stephen, will be looking at those attacks in full, the reasons behind them, the possible reasons for the intolerance or xenophobic intolerance, here from Constitution Hill. Stephen?
Tsepiso, thank you very much indeed. We go now to Chriselda Lewis. She's standing by in Gandhi Square, the site of some of the violence we've seen in Johannesburg.
Well, good evening to you, Stephen, live from Gandhi Square here in the Johannesburg CBD. In just a moment, we'll be speaking to the Africa Diaspora Forum, who will give us figures about exactly how many foreign nationals are displaced since the violence began. And we'll also speak to the chairperson of the Izinduna here in Gauteng about ongoing negotiations with government to resolve the crisis.
Chriselda, thank you. To Maageketla, Mohlabe now at the Tsolo Refugee Centre in Katlehong.
Good evening to you, Stephen. This is Tsolo Community Hall in Katlehong, Gauteng's eastern, where over 250 people have been placed in order to seek some shelter following the violence that wreaked havoc in Johannesburg as well as surrounding areas there. And of course, we understand that over 800 people have since been displaced, and the voice that we hear from this particular hall is that of pain, and of course, pain that also has tears in it. We will be bringing you all these details in a moment.
Maageketla, Mohlabe, thank you very much indeed. All right, but first, starting off our special broadcast tonight with your headlines this Monday night. Business owners in Johannesburg say they're concerned about the impact of the violence and looting. The ANC calls for gender-based violence to be declared a national emergency. And Cape Town Mayor Dan Plato adds his voice to calls for an end to the killing of women and children. A special broadcast for you tonight. What's behind the violence is the theme of our special broadcast after the violence and looting of the last few days. We go live now to Chriselda Lewis, who's standing by at Gandhi Square in Johannesburg.
Well, a very good evening to you, Stephen, as we continue with this special broadcast here on the SABC News channel. As the body count rises, the official figure that was given by the Police Minister Begicele today is that 12 people have so far been killed, but that number could be revised, of course, pending investigations, and more than 630 people have been arrested since the start of the violence. Of course, now this has had a ripple effect where we've seen retaliatory attacks in other parts of the continent as a result of the attacks on foreign nationals here in South Africa. So tonight we bring you to the doorstep of where this violence has been taking place over the past couple of weeks here in the Johannesburg CBD. And just to give you a sense there, Stephen, of what we noticed just a couple of hours ago when we arrived here was that foreign nationals, in fact, all the shops here in the Johannesburg CBD seem to be closing much more earlier now over fears, of course, that once the sun goes down, there could be a resurgence in violence. Of course, we saw a resurgence of that violence in some parts of Johannesburg yesterday, in Malvern, for example, where some shops were looted there. Lots of condemnation coming from the president, coming from various quarters of government to the violence that seems to be continuing. So tonight, we will speak to two individuals and also some other individuals as well to get a sense of why the violence itself is continuing, exactly how many foreign nationals are displaced now. And even though there had been reassurance that was given by the Izinduna that the violence would not continue, there seems to be those pockets of violence that continue here in Johannesburg. Let me start, of course, with the chairperson of the Izinduna in the Gauteng province. Let me start with you, Ntate Simpiwe. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Dr. Mhlongo. Dr. Mhlongo, you had given reassurance just a couple of hours ago that the violence would stop, but it is continuing. What is the issue?
I cannot guarantee that there will be peace forever, but we have got actually, we think that because we have spoken a lot about this, we think that it's going to become down very soon.
But that hasn't happened. I recall speaking to you at the Jeppe police station. That's where you had met with the police minister, Maageketla, and you gave assurance. I asked you that question about whether you thought the talks that were going on would bring an end to the violence, and you said you believed so. There seems to be some kind of miscommunication between yourselves and the hostel residents themselves. Is that the case?
Actually, we cannot guarantee peace, but at the moment, what we see, what we hear from the people is that they are demanding the immediate attention from the government so that they can raise their concerns and complaints.
A meeting was scheduled to be held in Mbizo, a government Mbizo, on Sunday, which was just yesterday. That was postponed, and according to our understanding, the postponement was also given your blessing. But we saw the former IFP leader, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, address the hostel residents yesterday. Was that per your invitation, or were you informed that he would come?
We were informed that he's coming. He is coming actually as himself and also as a prominent figure in the country. So he is a highly esteemed leader. So he just came to speak to the people because he has got ability to calm down situations like this.
But the situation did not calm down. What we actually saw moments later, hours later, were some of the shops in Malvern being destroyed there. And as a result of people not wanting to listen, they were demanding government.
Yes, after hours, yes, there was actually chaos, looting whatsoever after hours. But the meeting went on well, although there were some people who were unruly, who were demanding government at the same time.
Would you say you're failing to put a lid on the violence? Because ultimately, those hostel dwellers are the ones that listen to you as Izinduna.
Oh, the word dwellers come again. I think you forgot. Actually, we are not failing. We are trying our best to let the people stop this. Especially the focus to be on hostels. It's not only in hostels, Malvern, other places as well. So there are many criminals around here because criminals have taken advantage of this situation.
Are you blaming it now solely on criminals? Because the discontent that we saw yesterday had come from the hostel residents who had been gathered at that particular location where the former IFP leader was.
Yes, but I can say that the crime also is taking place. That is dominating actually because the lootings, burnings and whatsoever is part of crime.
I'll come back to you just very shortly. Let's just get a sense now of exactly how many people have been displaced. We might not have the full figures just as yet, but we'll get a sense from the Africa Diaspora Forum. Dr. Vusi Sibanda joins us this evening. Thank you very much for joining us here in the Johannesburg CBD, Doc. Let's get an official figure on exactly how many foreign nationals have been displaced. My colleague Maageketla Mohlabe is out in Katlehong. He has some figures there, but what do you have at your disposal as those being on the ground currently?
Well, look, the people that are in the shelter, for example, We know that we've got 588 adults and 277 children. That is only people that are at the shelter. We also know that there are people that are living, next to the mountain in Albertine that have not been able to come down, to get to stay at the shelter, because when people fled, that particular area, they did not all, manage to get, assistance. And we know that as well. Even last night, there were people that were being evacuated in Julius. I actually called General Marshall, in the middle of the night, and they helped with evacuating quite a few, I think individuals, from areas where they felt that, they were going to be banned. So the numbers that we have right now on a rough, scale, we're looking at in excess of 2,000 to 3,000 people that have been displaced.
You have in part blamed government's demeanor. You've termed it as demeanor to the spread of this violence, including the retaliatory attacks that we've seen on other parts of the African continent. Talk to me a bit about this demeanor that you're unhappy about.
Look, I think just as you had, the chief of the Indunas, Ubaba Mhlongo, was saying that, look, people were unhappy yesterday because government did not show. The failure of government, to come to the party, for example, to meet people, these are people that elected the government, and when they have a problem, they expect to speak to the government. If the government doesn't make a show, then that becomes a problem, and people realize that this government doesn't care. And the attacks that we're seeing are more or less of what we'd call exit wounds, because people are bottling, they've bottled up a lot of things that they want, to vent out. And, from the onset, we had DECO, scheduling a meeting. I think it was last week, Friday, the meeting which was ultimately cancelled. And it is my thinking that, the reason why we saw attacks taking place in Nigeria, we saw, for example, what happened in Zambia, in DRC and Mozambique, it was mainly because, people felt that, the government of South Africa is not really committed, to getting to intervene and stop, these attacks, because the failure of government to come out very strongly against this, governments will always be very diplomatic. That's one thing that we know. Governments in Africa in particular, they like the sovereignty principle to such an extent that even if you do something wrong, they will not say anything about it. So it is our view that the reason why, these attacks took place in some of these countries, and I think that the governments also did fold their hands and said, oh, well, look, the South African government is not doing anything. So why is it, called upon us to actually go out and stop our people from doing the attacks? And that is the demeanor that we're talking about, that the body language, of the South African government has been sending negative signals, to other countries in the continent. And as a result, that is why we can see that, these attacks, are continuing even, across the continent.
You've also called, or you're looking at calls for compensation for some of the business people who have been affected by this. Talk to us a bit about this, because this will also likely open up a floodgate of demands and calls for compensation. Talk to us about how you believe this could be structured.
Well, look, I think we quite understand that the courts might not, easily, for example, like you've rightfully said, that, look at these kind of, claims, because it would open, a fury of, such claims. But if we look at what is happening in the Julius area, we've got viable business, not just small businesses, multi-million, businesses. We've seen, for example, one gentleman that came in who said, the cheapest vehicle out of a fleet of 50 vehicles that he had, cost 135,000. So we're talking about businesses that employ 10, 15, 20 people, and some of them had, financing from the banks and all that. So we're hoping that, there can be a sitting down, starting from, with the South African government, if it means even the African Development Bank gets involved. But it would really make a lot of sense, because as we are talking right now, people are complaining about unemployment, and the businesses that have been destroyed in Julius, it means more unemployment is going to come in. And yet we have got capable business people that have been running, successful business people that have been employing, more than 10, 15 people. Last night I spoke to a lady from, Eastern Cape, who actually said, you know what, I have taken my children to a place of safety, but I'm going to come here because I've worked in this company for the last 20 years. If this company is going down, I'm going to go down with it. And I asked that, is that your company? He says, no, it's not my company. But you know what? This is where the bread, the butter, everything that, I have to, feed my children comes from. And that's why I've got this attachment. So what we are saying, therefore, is that there needs to be a strategy and a means of how to rebuild the economy. Because if this continues, you can imagine if Julius, for example, in Malvern becomes a ghost town, that where are all those people going to go? The means of livelihood, that have been established in that area are all going to be destroyed. So we need to find a means of compensating those people. It doesn't necessarily have to come from South Africa alone, but there needs to be a means.
Right. And I think just a couple of hours ago, I did see a tweet from the official feed of the Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari, who said that he's received a feedback, from the special envoy that he had sent to South Africa to gather more information about exactly what was going on. Calls again for calm. I will just bring in a few gentlemen at the moment. I think let me start with you, sir, before I come to you, Babu Mhlongo. Sir, let me just get your name. If you could come just a bit closer this way. Let me get your name. Where are you from?
I'm Amir Sheikh. I'm the spokesperson for the African Diaspora Forum.
All right. We'll come through to you in just a few moments. Let's start with this gentleman here because we have spoken to come through this way, sir. Let's just get your sense, sir, about, what we're witnessing in South Africa over the past couple of weeks.
Okay, my name is Teenage Musakwembe. I'm from African Civil Revolutionary Movement. I'm a South African, and we've been active from day one this situation started. And then we've been of aid. We went to their homes where those people are kept in the halls and so on. And we've accounted mostly injuries that we testified, the bombing of the mosques, and the 2 mosques in Katlehong, Vosloorus, and the other one here in Nugget Street. And then we've seen, at least in Katlehong, that the police tried to secure the community that is there in the 2 halls that are based there. And we did what, as an organization, we went to deliver food and groceries and some toiletries for the people, and we gave them guarantee that we'll try to communicate with the communities that is very confused in the township, that they don't even know what they are fighting for. And we actually had to mobilize in the communities to protect those other migrants that are in their communities. So also last night we've been in Julius the whole night. We've been observing the situation, and we discovered many people are very angry and they are very beefed in terms of the way government ignored them to their calls, and they were not happy when the King Buthelezi was addressing them, because they felt government undermined them after the Minister of Police Maageketla promised that he will actually make sure that they address the matter and resolve the issues. So this has led also to criminals hijacking the platform, because most of the people, they felt like, look, we waited and we wasted our time. That's when they took a walk into the CBD, took advantage of the situation. So with us as ACRM, we still request and advise to the South Africans in the township, because they don't even know the core of this. They should not just partake, because it's all criminal elements, and at the end of the day, they don't even have issues as South Africans against these people. So we suggest government to reinforce itself and get down to the people and take accountability.
All right, Babu Mhlongo, I want to bring you back in there. If you could just come towards us. It's very disconcerting to hear exactly how many people have been displaced by the ongoing violence. We're talking about figures, according to the Africa Diaspora Forum now, running into the thousands, close to 3,000. I mean, why would you agree to have the Imbizo postponed, yet the violence itself is continuing to simmer?
Maageketla has got the power to continue with Imbizo or to stop it. He said he was also respecting the king, because there was Mkosi Mhlanga taking place in KZN. Also, as well, actually the killing that is continuing, we condemn that as well. But the people are out of control at the moment because of the government. They demand the government to see the government. That's why also they did not listen to Shenge because of these demands. They want Kele, they want the government, they want all departments.
But when is that going to happen? Because, I mean, you speak on behalf of some of those who are accused of being part of this violence. What is the way forward? I mean, we saw the resurgence of violence, yet there is no guarantee. You cannot even give me a guarantee that there won't be violence in the next couple of hours.
What we need now is the government to approach these people as soon as possible. It will stop.
But when is as soon as possible? You agreed to have a postponement to an Imbizo that was meant to address individuals who are very aggrieved by what they say is the situation in the country that's turning out of control.
The meeting was initiated by the Minister of Police. So even now, we shall wait for him until he organizes a new meeting. According to him, he phoned me today saying that he's busy arranging a new meeting soon.
But the hostel residents themselves, I mean, What is their feeling about all of this? I mean, they've put their grievances on the table. And I know that yesterday the government had been given 24 hours to respond to these demands. I mean, we're fast approaching that 24 hours, soon to be over that. And you can't give me any guarantees that there won't be any violence.
Actually, the ultimatum that was given by the people, it was people from the floor, because there was a time where we gave them chance to speak. So now there is no actually legal ultimatum about that, because it was people from the floor. On our side.
But those people from the floor, Babu Mhlongo, are people who are living at the hostels. They are hostel residents. They were part of that meeting, and they seemed very aggrieved.
Their concerns and complaints were not received, because Shenge only came to let them stop the violence. Actually, nothing is with the government at the moment until they come. The government did not address them at the moment.
All right. We're just about to wrap up here. Let me bring you in, Dr. Sibanda, very quickly. Just tell me, what do you think government needs to do immediately to ensure that there is a cessation of violence and no further loss of life?
Well, we think the government needs, for example, to meet, to come down. There is a group of people, for example, like the hostel, our residents that are so aggrieved. And we know that these are the same people that came into town and that were dispersed by the police, using, the rubber bullets and stun grenades. The government needs to come down and speak to these people, speak to the leadership of the people and the people together, and listen, give them a hearing as to what it is that concerns them, and try and find solutions and, make undertakings on how to deal with the issues, going forward, which means that basically all the communities, including the migrant communities that are being, accused of crime and what, we need to be sitting down with government to map a way forward to say, okay, in terms of crime, how do we work forward, dealing with crime and the concerns, that the people are bringing forward? Because some of these issues involve, corruption that is taking place in government offices. It includes, sloppiness, for example, and bribery. So what we need to do basically is we need to see the government coming and sitting down with all the relevant stakeholders and say, and we don't need this tomorrow, we need this now. Because if it does not happen now, it means, the killings will continue. It might actually happen that right now, maybe they are actually gearing to start again in Julius and Malvern. And that means, again, Africa as a whole is also burning.
Right, concerns of further violence, Stephen, in Johannesburg, as we've seen over the past couple of days. But I can tell you from where we're standing at the moment, it's extremely quiet. But you can almost get a sense from the people that you speak to that we're not completely out of the woods yet. There are concerns that the violence itself could start up again, and whether government is going to come and address hostile residents and the general population itself in the next couple of hours is certainly something that needs to be seen. But certainly a solution to this crisis needs to be found immediately. Many of those who are in negotiations with government to try and find a solution to this problem at the moment say government needs to find a solution right away. Let's take a short break here on The Full View. Much more coming back after the break.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And we're live from Constitution Hill, where we're in discussion with various people, various stakeholders about recent attacks against foreigners. And of course, it hasn't just been foreigners. South Africans have also been casualties of what some have said is rampant crime, anarchy. Some have just simply called it intolerance. And this intolerance has been interpreted by many as even being across the social structure. You remember that earlier on we spoke to a South African businesswoman whose business was attacked merely because she sold African prints. So we're going to trace back what the source of this intolerance is, and just looking at the meaning of the word xenophobia, you will know that it is said to be a fear and hatred of strangers, which proves to be depressing. Of course, it's all in our language, how we discriminate against each other, and how apt that we are coming to you from Constitution Hill, where at this very court just ahead of me is where many of our political leaders fought for the right for freedom, the right to exist. And we talk to Mike Siluma, who's a political analyst, and Koketso Mwetu is a social activist. And we talk about some of the sources of this. Perhaps, Koketso, let's start with you. As a social activist, was it a push-pull factor that led you to this choice of career?
Well, I mean, given where one is, right, given where one is located as a black woman of a particular, coming from a particular class, you know, you kind of don't choose, you don't step into the place, you agitate it into it by your own circumstances and those of the community around you. Yeah.
So let's talk about the community where you live and just your point of view of what you've seen happening in South Africa the past couple of years. It's very interesting that we talk about the 2008 attacks as the genesis of these xenophobic attacks, but yet if we go back in history, there have been attacks against foreigners in very myriad places, myriad ways. We'll talk about that, but tell us about your life story.
I think for me right now, where one comes from, you know, it's the typical story, you know, for coming from a particular class of South Africa, lack of access to water, lack of land security, land tenureship, you know, and some of the socio-economic conditions, healthcare depleted, and we've seen over time that it's gotten much, much worse. Yeah, so there's quite a tension, right, where people need basic access to basic services, and in many places that has fallen apart. Over and above that, we're seeing a rise in inequality. We're seeing environmental devastation rise as well. And all of these are bound to lead to conflict. Inequality itself is conflict, right? It's a form of structural violence. And so it is a given that the social contract will collapse. Yeah.
I mean, looking at a place like Johannesburg, we spoke about the high levels of migration. So naturally, as you say, there will be a battle for resources. But then in a place that is so densely populated, especially with people from other parts of the continent, then people then start turning against each other for the battle of those resources, believing that there is a lack because of the presence of those people. Do you agree?
So I think just before we talk about the violence that has broken out, we have to also look back. As you've spoken over the years, post-94 actually, there's been a number of, you know, xenophobic violent attacks. But right now, this attack, this moment we're in, comes on the back of an election campaigns that were driven by very xenophobic rhetoric, right? And over and above that, we saw political elites, some of whom are government officials, increasingly talking about, you know, state failure, putting the burden of state failure on foreign nationals. And then these things are not separate, right? We've seen the use of language like naming people illegals, which is a de facto criminalization of a human being. And more recently, we've seen the law and order invoked to continue steer the xenophobic agenda. Now, these things are not separate. Before you have violence, the manifestation of prejudice in a violent form is a continuum of all of these things. The language we use, the the criminalization of human beings' mere existence. Earlier this year, City of Johannesburg Mayor Herman Mashaba went as far as saying that these people are bringing us Ebolas. We know throughout history over and over again that the dehumanization, the use of language which dehumanizes, inhibits people from seeing others as human beings who are also deserving of dignity and humanity.
So, Mike, it's very interesting, as I was saying earlier on, about the root of the word, the etymology of the word xenophobia. It says a fear and hatred of strangers. So the question then becomes, when do people separate, as in hatred of strangers could simply mean somebody from a different ethnic group, somebody that you have had very little experience interacting with, therefore a natural distrust and hate. Is there a thin line in South Africa, given our political history, between that fear and hatred of a stranger transporting itself into a foreigner?
I think, Tsepiso, that the issue of whether this is xenophobia or Afrophobia or whatever we choose to call it, it's actually a red herring, you know. In any society, you will always have people liking or disliking certain people. There will be people who don't like people of a particular religion. There might be people who don't like people from a particular region, for example. Okay, it can be people from one tribe not liking people from another tribe. That is a phenomenon in society. My issue is that it is the duty of the state to make sure that law and order is maintained, so that we all are subscribing and conforming to a certain set of rules as citizens, so that there can be coherence and harmony in society. So the state plays a very important role to hold the line and to enforce the rules. In this case, enforcing law and order. So I think the issue of whether South Africans are xenophobic or not is a secondary issue. It is relevant, but it is not the root cause.
Okay. So I want to talk about the responsibility of the state and its capacity. I must ask, though, because people have said, why are we not seeing it from the same prism as the immigration crisis that we've seen from Africa to other countries, or even within Africa? Why is the conversation different when we talk about the attacks against foreigners in this country? Because the root causes may also be similar, looking for a better life, seeing people as marginalizing the available, or rather usurping the available resources for the inhabitants or indigenes of a country.
I think that, Tsepiso, it does not matter which country you go to. All countries, all governments in all countries, their primary responsibility in the first place is towards the citizens of that country. If there are people who migrate into those countries, it is well and good. And then those people have got to be extended the hospitality and the protections that people in that country also enjoy. But I think that we cannot run away from the fact that the South African government, in this case, has got a primary responsibility of making sure that it looks after South Africans, that South Africans are comfortable, they've got jobs, they've got shelter, etc., etc. If there are people who come into the country, there are conventions that govern the migration of people to which South Africa is a signatory. And the South African state has got to make sure that those conventions are observed. But there is a view that says that South Africa belongs to everybody. Anybody can come. By virtue of landing at OR Tambo, or by virtue of crossing the Limpopo, you become a citizen, you are entitled to all the rights that South Africans do have, to all the resources that South Africans are entitled to. It does not happen in any other country. If you go to other countries, for example, people like to say that when South Africans were in exile, they were looked after, etc. But they were controlled. If you were in Botswana, you were at Dukwe, in the camp in Dukwe, looked after by the UN. If you're in Swaziland, you were treated differently, but you were recorded, you were known, your whereabouts were known, it was known whether you are here to study or to do other things, etc. So there was no way that you could have caused trouble there and not be known and not be accounted for. So it is important that even even as we welcome people into the country, the laws of the country must be enforced across the board, whether it is South Africans who break the law or whether it's people from outside. You know, it is a critical thing for our society that the law and order is...
So has the state and its machinery and its various arms failed the people of South Africa and the foreign nationals who are living here? And is it being politicized, this problem that we're facing, as Koketsu was saying?
I think that I feel sorry for the president, actually, because for a lot of people, reasonably speaking, you expect that when there is a problem in a country, the government and the president will have a button, so to speak, that they press to stop the chaos in that particular society. But the reality in South Africa is that the South African state and its organs have been so weakened in large measure by a culture of permissiveness and condonation of criminality, and secondly, by the political crisis that is playing itself out in the ANC, which has engulfed organs of state, for example, the NPA and the intelligence services. So we are at a stage where the state is so incapacitated, it is not able, for example, to police the borders properly, it cannot run home affairs properly, it cannot maintain law and order, you know, allowing people, large numbers of people to run amok in the city with dangerous weapons, and the police can do nothing about that. So all of those things cumulatively have led to a state which is not able to do the primary function of a government, which is to maintain law and order and to protect citizens and property.
So, Koketsu, yes, you want to comment on that?
Absolutely. So I think we should draw a distinction, right? When we talk about law and order, we should be very, very careful. Right now, we've seen law and order weaponized, right? Where it says it's almost like to protect us South Africans from them, we need to impose law and order on them, right? The things we say should be rooted in facts and evidence, right? If we look at the numbers, you know, the Institute of Security Studies is but one example of a place that does so much research into the bulk of the crime in this place is being committed by South Africans, right? Who are obviously a majority here as well. But there's a whole set of just how it's being weaponized, law and order is being invoked to suggest that, you know, because people are foreign nationals, they are the cause of crime. We saw Minister of Police Maageketla earlier this year, you know, talk about the criminality of foreign nationals, you know. That is exceptionally xenophobic. And so I think we have to be very, very careful when we use these phrases and suggest that certain people, you know, deserve law and order imposed on them because they're going to do harm to us. I draw a very, very big distinction on that, yeah.
So, you spoke about the violence in our language that we use on a daily basis, and as you say, how it's being politicized. But then what is the violence on the psyche of those who are affected and afflicted by these attacks, whether they are foreign nationals or South African nationals? Is it something that will be passed down from generation to generation?
Of course, we are a society of trauma. We are a wounded society in so many ways, right? We know the horrors of displacement, you know, given our history, both past and contemporary forms of history, where we've seen a number of people displaced from a day to day. That is not things you can just get over. One of the things I remember where I stay is close to the site of, you know, where the people have been displaced and some of the violence has been happening. Just last night, a family that is known to some of us was removed from the building in which they live, right? This is a family with children and so on. Kids are growing up seeing all of this violence around them. You can't just wake up and get over it, you know? That is a very, very deep pain. I mean, one of our partners, the Casual Workers Advice Office, which does such important work protecting workers, you know, precarious workers. Their office, as part of this, was also looted and burned and badly damaged, you know. This is a place that provides services to precarious workers in a time where we see companies are exploiting workers in so many ways, you know. They are rendering an important service. It's not even just about the institution, it is the workers who are harmed when such things happen, right?
In a sentence, very quickly, Mike, how can government arrest the situation, arrest it quickly and sustainably?
I think that it is critical too, because I think that our country has been drifting towards anarchy for a long time. where we try to excuse and explain away. People break the law, and we find a way to say when people are looting and doing that, it's because they are hungry. You see, when people are endangering one of our economic lifelines, the N3, they're burning trucks there. We say, oh, it's because they don't like foreigners, so whatever they're doing is justified. So we need to begin to arrest that. And I think that it is very important for the government to begin to deal with a firm hand within the law. I think that our constitution does allow government to deal with criminality, and we're not talking about immigrants, or because criminality, there's no nationality in this case. The government must deal with all criminality equally across the board, but with a firm hand.
Thank you very much. Mike Saluma, political analyst, Kokezo Mwedi, a social activist. The conversation continues here on Channel 404 and the rest of SABC platforms. We're talking about attacks against foreigners. What are the ramifications and what is the source of these attacks? We're taking a quick break. Don't go away.
Welcome back to our special broadcast, trying to probe the causes of the violence and looting that we've seen in South Africa over the last few days that have been directed at foreign nationals. In Tanzania, NGOs are trying to help people who've been affected by the violence here. They're also looking at seeing as if the Southern African Development Community, SADC, can play a role in this situation. We're live now to Tanzania. Martina Kabasama is the national coordinator of the Southern Africa Human Rights NGO Network in Tanzania. Martina, good evening to you. Thank you for your time tonight. How are people in Tanzania reacting to what they're seeing happening here in South Africa?
Good evening, Stephen. Thank you. The people of Tanzania have their own problems according to their situation. Now, when they see South African people are coming up with such violence, they are just wondering why South Africans can't tolerate the situation. But for the civil society of Tanzania or NGOs, we are trying to come together. We have come out with several press conferences. And for example, our Southern Africa Human Rights NGOs Network, Saharingon, came out last week on Friday with other two organizations, the Right Way, TRW, and the Action for Change, ARCH. We came out with a statement just to appeal to our president, who is the chairperson of the SADC countries, to collaborate or to make sure that the head of states come together and just see how they can amicably sort out and solve the problem of South Africans, though we think the South Africans themselves are the first to solve their problems.
President John Magufuli is currently the chairman of the South African Development Community. What role do you believe he and SADC can play in stopping the violence that we've seen from happening?
Before stepping to our president, who is the current chairperson of the SADC countries, Tanzania is the father of the liberation of the southern part of Africa. Our fathers really played a great role to make sure that all countries of southern part of Africa are liberated. Now the President Magufuli has a chance, and we thank God that this has happened during his term of chairmanship. And we think he has the ability to call his fellow head of states to make sure that they solve or they see how they can settle the problems of South Africa. We Tanzanians, we have confidence with our president, and we believe he can do it.
Struggles across southern Africa. The fact that the ANC, our African National Congress, our governing party, has had such a strong relationship with Tanzania over the years. Do you believe that that shows that younger people, younger South Africans, should be very, very aware of that?
Yeah, we think that those young people of South Africa should be aware of that, should read the history, and should respect that history.
Martina Kabasama, thank you very much indeed. I really do appreciate the time tonight. And of course, she is the human rights advocate and a national coordinator of the Southern African Human Rights NGO Network, the Tanzania chapter. Let's go back now to the Tsolo in Katlehong. Maageketla Mohlabe standing by.
Good evening to you, Stephen. Of course, we are live at Ekurhuleni, where at this particular hall, we have over 250 people that have been given accommodation following the spate of violence in Johannesburg and surrounding areas. But here in Ekurhuleni, we understand that over 800 of them have since been displaced. And of course, we know that 2 people here in Ekurhuleni died amid that particular incident. As you can see, some, of course, already trying to make their bed so that they may be able to just spend a little bit of a night. But I'm told by others here that they are even struggling to sleep, considering that others that they were actually sharing some house or even accommodation from where they were, they cannot locate them. They don't know where they are. They are not even sure if they are still alive. And of course, we will actually be joined by one of the people that actually are here to speak to us. My sister, thanks so much for your time, Roslyn. You've been here. How has it been like to be here?
Yeah, thank you so much. It was hard to be here, and it's hard because we are still shaking. We can't believe what happened. We are all Africans, and I believe we must unite. In Zimbabwe, I know there are other Africans who are married to Zimbabweans, and they are staying there in Zimbabwe. I believe we are Africans. We must unite. Yeah.
And of course, the sentiment has been out there, and of course, we cannot rule out the fact that some of these sentiments have been marred by xenophobic annotations or connotations. Just tell me, how does it feel really to live in South Africa and, of course, see this particular violence happen?
It's that it's not all South Africans who do these crimes. Other people, they are so good, and they are helping people. Like we are here, there are people who are helping, who are opening their hands. So it's not all people who are bad, but other people, they are nice people. Like where I was staying in my area, those people, they are not bad. I was staying nicely with them. So I can't say all South Africans are bad, but it's only maybe few people who doesn't know what they are doing or who doesn't think nicely.
And what we know about some of the people that you shared accommodation with back where you lived?
For now, we don't know if they are still alive, because that moment everyone just ran away. Others, they ran to mountains. So for right now, we don't know if they are still alive, because we don't have contacts. We don't have contacted with them for right now.
So you have been struggling to get in touch with them?
Yeah, we are struggling so much to get in touch with them. Yeah.
But if you were to go home, let's say you were to go back home in Zimbabwe, do you think things would really be quite different from what we have seen here at home?
Yeah, we think so. Yeah.
Why do you think
so? It's hard to determine if things will be different at the moment, because the situation is still tense and we are still in shock. So at the moment, we can't say anything. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for your time, Rosaline. Rosaline is one of the people that are here, of course, seeking refugee in this particular hall. And of course, Stephen, in the back there, these are some of the people that are actually tripping in following this particular incidents in Johannesburg as well as in Katlehong. I understand that they are actually giving the officials here their names, and we are told that more might actually be coming through. You can actually expect that particular number, 250 of those that are here, to actually increase overnight or even tomorrow. So we are told that others have actually been asking the government of South Africa to actually step in and be proactive in order to make sure that this violence stops. But of course, we have seen government officials trying to actually plead for calm and as well as for order in these areas. But despite that, we haven't really seen any changes. Of course, prayer sessions were held on Sunday or even over the weekend. We haven't really seen anything much in terms of change on the ground. But as it stands, these are just some of the people that have actually been saying that we are here because we are desperate. We want our voices to be heard. And these are the voices that are at pains in terms of explaining the situation that has engulfed the streets of Johannesburg, even as well as the streets of Katlehong.
Maageketla, Mohlabe, thank you very much indeed for your contribution to our special broadcast tonight. Your weather is up next. More news in a moment.
Thank you very much. Time for us to look at those conditions that are expecting over the country for tonight and tomorrow. Clear skies expected over most of the central interior, where the Free State is turning into Gauteng, Mpumalanga and Limpopo, with only partly cloudy conditions expected along the southern coastline of the country, extending into that western interior of the Northern Cape for tonight and tomorrow. Still expecting mostly clear skies over Free State, extending into Gauteng and Limpopo, with a warning of runaway fires expected over that interior of the Northern Cape, extending to the northern interior of the Eastern Cape and Western Cape for tomorrow, with some partly cloudy conditions still expected along the southern coastline of the Eastern Cape and Western Cape, and also over that western interior of the Western Cape and Northern Cape. We're expecting some morning fog patches over those areas, so please be careful. Poor visibility is a possibility over those areas. Now, looking at our overnight temperatures, still expecting some relatively chilly conditions over South Africa, with Appleton expecting a minimum of 12, with 4 being a minimum over Bloemfontein, with Johannesburg expecting a low of 8, 6 being a minimum over Polokwane. Cooler conditions over Devon with a minimum of 14, with PE also expecting a minimum of 14. The Mother City, cool conditions with a minimum of 12. Now, looking at our provinces in detail, starting off with Gauteng, we're expecting a mild day over Pretoria with a maximum of 28, 27 being a maximum over Johannesburg for tomorrow. Limpopo, clear skies expected over Polokwane, with only high-lying clouds expected over that area with a maximum of 29. Musina peaking at 30. with 31 be your maximum over Bakersford for tomorrow. Clear skies also expected over Mpumalanga with warm conditions over Emelo with a maximum of 24. With 28 be your maximum over Emalahleni. Middleburg peaking at 27. Warm conditions expected along that coastal line of KwaZulu-Natal with Durban peaking at 26, but becoming hotter as we move into Ladysmith with a maximum of 29. Pietermaritzburg peaking at 30. Partly conditions expected along that coastal line of Eastern Cape with PE peaking at 25. 26 bringing a maximum over East London. Moving to the interior, Komani can expect a maximum of 31. Chilly conditions in the morning over Cape Town, but picking up in the afternoon with a maximum of 23. George expecting a maximum of 24 for tomorrow. Clear conditions expected over Springbok with a maximum of 29, but hotter conditions over Appleton with a high of 33, with Kuruman peaking at 28. Kimberley peaking at 29. It's going to be a warm day over that interior of the Free State tomorrow, with Bloemfontein peaking at 28. Sasolburg peaking at 26. And lastly, over the Northwest Province, clear skies expected over Tosca with a maximum of 28. Mahikeng peaking at 30, with Rustenburg expecting some high-lying clouds with a maximum of 29. Now moving on to Wednesday, we're expecting a cold front over that interior of the Western Cape, with causing some 30% chance of showers and rain along that coastal line. Cold conditions also expected over that interior, but becoming warmer as we move towards the central interior over the Free State. But hot conditions expected over Gauteng and Limpopo for Wednesday. And Thursday, expecting that cold front over that interior of the Eastern Cape, causing that 30 to 60% chance of showers and rain over that area, with cold to cool conditions expected over the southern coastline of the country, but cooler as we move into Free State. Gauteng can expect some hot conditions for Thursday. Also, Mpumalanga and Limpopo expecting similar conditions for Thursday. That's all the weather I have for you. Stay tuned to SABC News.
Coletta Njohi for SABC News in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Good evening and welcome to a special SABC News broadcast focusing on the violence plaguing our country, in particular in Gauteng. I'm Stephen Critters. Our show, Behind the Violence, coming to you live from various locations across Gauteng. Tsepiso Makwetla will be standing live for you at Constitution Hill. But first, your headlines. Former SABC board chairperson Ben Ngubane tells the Zondo inquiry he had a very limited relationship with the Gupta family. As women march, Free State police arrest a 24-year-old man in connection with the murder of a female student near Welkom. Government promises African ambassadors it will take steps to take the necessary steps to protect their citizens from harm. Well, we go live now to Tsepiso Makwetla standing by as part of our special broadcast from Constitution Hill tonight.
Well, thanks a lot for that, Stephen. As you say, a special live broadcast for the next hour. We continue our conversations with various stakeholders. I am co-anchoring with Desiree Chalke, looking at various factors of this. We'll look at the history of incidents of xenophobia, where and why, and also delve into what efforts are being made, Desiree, by various members of the South African citizenry and population to stem this a very, very nasty phenomenon in its bud.
Absolutely, Tsepiso. It's an important conversation, right? And several African politicians coming out to say the xenophobia that they are hearing reports of is a huge betrayal of Africa's solidarity with South Africa during the apartheid times. So we're asking that question today. What are the root causes of all of this violence? And we'd like to welcome our guests. Let's start at the far end, and we have Advocate Ike Khumalo, who's joining us to have this conversation. Welcome and thank you for coming through this evening.
Thank you to the million viewers at home.
Let's, cross our fingers. And let's also welcome Dr. Kingsley Makwetla. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you, Desiree.
And we miss you, Manelo. Where are you?
Thank you, Desiree.
You're here to talk to us about a musical that you're working on related to xenophobia, but obviously we'll also touch on industry matters relating to this conversation about xenophobia.
And perhaps maybe let me start with you, Advocate Khumalo, just from a social perspective. Desiree was saying just now that this really is a stain on South Africa's history, but I think a public shame for the governing party, the African National Congress, because having fought for liberation through the help, the degree to which some will argue at the moment how far it really went. But a united Africa coming together to help free the people of South Africa. Is this an opportunity to rework our democratic model, to look back at a society that we've built and the society we want to build?
Let me say this. It is a shame on the ruling party to unleash foreigners on the South African people. You mentioned, Desiree mentioned that it is a betrayal. It is not a betrayal. You know, the African continent, they are solving their socio-economic conditions at our expense. They're dumping their people. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And when you say that they helped us during apartheid, very few countries helped us. Let me tell you this. In 1977, if I think, 20 students, ANC sent 20 students in Nigeria. There was an uproar, people complaining, saying they are here to steal our wives. You know, one student was poured with acid on his face. They had to be rescued. Almost all these African countries, they've expelled us. You mentioned Mozambique, they've expelled us. They closed the camps. Swaziland, they've expelled us. Zimbabwe, they have expelled us. Lesotho, you know, they provided intelligence service to the SADF. You know, that's why people like Bohani, they were attacked there. So most of these African countries, they never helped us the way they claim that they've helped. And we are helping them now. We're investing in African countries. We're investing in MTN, you know, in ShopRite. You're not benefiting. They can trash those companies. We're not benefiting the way, you know, we're supposed supposed to. Let me tell you this. You have APLA, you have MK. They fought more in Zimbabwe struggle. They fought more in Angola, not here. You've never seen them firing a bullet here. So when people say that we've betrayed them, actually, it is a conspiracy of these African countries to conspire against us. They send their people here, and while you look back, Nigeria, they have expelled Ghanaians. Ghanaians have done the same. Angola, they are expelling foreigners. Kenya, they are doing the same as we speak. They are expelling foreigners. We cannot allow our country, to be overwhelmed by drug dealers, and when we complain, we are told that we are xenophobic. What part of xenophobia is that?
Dr. Makwetla, if we take our history back to just 25 years ago, and when the new dispensation came in, and you worked with former President Thabo Mbeki, and he has largely been blamed for this collegiality towards African countries. His African Renaissance policy encouraged working together with Africans. What kind of conversations would have gone on in terms of how we regulate the entry and movement of people from other countries into this new democratic South Africa?
Can I first respond to what Ike was saying? I lived in exile. I spent the best part of my young age in exile. My experience with a lot of African countries, indeed, they supported us. Agostinho Neto said, when Angola was free, he said, Angola é trancher firme da revolução in Africa, meaning that Angola is a firm trench of the revolution in Africa. Provided centuries to all of us. Mozambique, Samora Machel provided a lot of support, military support to all of us. And Mozambicans were killed, Basutus were killed, Botswanas were killed by the racist apartheid regime. So they sacrificed a great deal. But despite that, this country was built on the sweat and blood of the migrant laborers from across the continent. If you remember Brayu's song, Estimela, it depicts the movement of people who came to build this country, industrialize this country, never got any benefits. Some of them, they retired in poverty in their homelands, never got anything out of this. And so I'm a beneficiary of the African solidarity.
Are we being ahistorical? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, we're not being. I think what we need to deal with is to put things in true perspectives. From my own perspective, the African continent sacrificed a great deal. I mean, I traveled with a Ghanaian passport throughout. Oliver Tambo had an Algerian diplomatic passport that he travels the world with. There was the African solidarity that we experienced to mobilize the world around. I mean, there were anti-apartheid movement throughout. Ibrahim Gambari, that I happen to know so much, a Nigerian, he used to chair the Special Committee Against Apartheid when I worked at the United Nations. You could see African solidarity each time there was something. We must, and I would encourage a lot of people to go and read a document that is called, it's a document that ushered the negotiations, Consensus Resolution on Apartheid and its Consequences. The architect of the document was Oliver Tambo and Thabo Mbeki.
It's very tempting to speak about documents and make it an academic conversation. But there's also the concern that socio-economically people have lived experiences where they suffer poverty at the hands of what Ike mentioned now as South Africans paying for something that they never really underwent.
And the majority of the people, they were in camps. They were in camps.
No, let me explain. Well, I was in exile. I can tell you where I was. Let me explain something that we should not justify as a society. Our economic and social conditions are not necessarily a prerequisite to vent out the anger on fellow Africans. I have studied ethnicity as a phenomenal conflict, and I'm afraid if we start politics of identity, we're going to turn against each other. We're going to look at which language do we speak. I mean, as it is, I was reading weekend newspapers that in Katlehong, vigilantes are starting to set up roadblocks to check if these people are really indeed South Africans. Now, how are we going to identify what we call us, one of us? What is that us?
Perhaps, Dr. Makwetla, let me jump in and ask Mr. Twala here. You are one of those who's been an activist here at home during that time in the liberation struggle. And just listening to Advocate Khumalo and Dr. Makwetla, there clearly is a divergence in what our history really is, and in relation to this. For somebody who was an activist here in South Africa at the time, what was your impression, and how much did you interact with musicians from other parts of the continent in our bid for liberation?
Look, in my sector, to be honest, we never experienced, especially myself, I've never been to exile. I've never experienced what Kingsley has experienced, obviously. But I did perform outside South Africa, and I was well received, you know, by my fellow African brothers. To be honest, you know, I wouldn't want to, you know, to turn this thing into some kind of, you know, war with our African brothers and sisters. You know, we need peace. You know, as we speak with various artists, Blem Mambazo, Mafigizol, all of us who are in the studio, we want to talk peace. We really don't think, you know, it's the right time, you know, to be actually fighting amongst ourselves as Africans.
So it's been politicized too much?
I think it's been politicized. I mean, South Africans are not xenophobic. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm with my African brothers from Mozambique, Nigeria, but obviously not drug lords and all that. But for us, it's normal. What we see in the streets, I thought maybe, you know, some criminal elements that are taking place, some people taking advantage of the situation.
But as you advocate peace in your processes of putting together your work, what kind of issues are you seeing are you highlighting through this process to say these are the things we need to confront as a society?
Well, I think there's been a problem of drugs, which foreigners, to be honest with you, there are Nigerian drug lords in our country who are killing our people, that we cannot condone. But there are good African people, I mean, I know one, I mean, our deputy, what's his name, Zimbabwean, public
Kevin Malunga.
Yes. But we have a lot of Zimbabweans, like professional people in our country. Not all of them, you know, are drug lords and all that. Hence, I'm saying that, you know, it's important for us, you know, to try not actually like see all Africans, you know, as being problem.
So, Mr. Khumalo, what for you is the solution?
This is before that. This is not a war against African brothers. You know, that's the problem with the misdiagnosis of our politicians. When I have our people raising this problem, they are called, they are condemned all the time. Nobody listens to them. And before I continue, the good doctor here clearly has never heard of Komati Peace Accord between Samora Machel and P.W. Porter, where they closed the camps, you know, where they expelled our comrades. In Swaziland was a very hostile country. But anyway, our government needs to listen to our people more. You know, we cannot suffer because 2 people went to exile. You know, then 20 million Nigerians come here, Somalis, and even people who never helped us. Some of these countries, they were in civil war from day one. They could not have helped us. You know, they bought more bullets, you know, than bread. They bought, you know. So now we're supposed to accommodate the rest of Africa. And when we do what the other African countries are doing, I mean Kenya now, you know, they're expelling people who are unnecessary into their countries. We cannot receive people who are coming here, adding no value, no specialized skills, people coming here, jumping borders to sell tomato.
But
we have surplus of tomatoes.
Are you not generalizing, though?
I'm not generalizing.
And I asked this
I'm
question.
talking facts.
Yes, but let's talk about facts. Do we have figures? Do we know how many foreign nationals are in this country? Do you know how many foreign nationals exist in the formal and informal labor market? Do we know how many of those are arrested because of crime? And I just want to understand that, because these politics of identity are clearly leading us to this point where we are. Are we going to give criminality a nationality? Is that what is important?
Let me tell you this, empirical evidence. Go to Joburg jail, go to Hillbrow Hospital, go to Paraguanath, you'll be far, far, far back, number 70,000 in front of you. There are people who are not supposed to be here. People come from Zambia to do operations as Steve Biko. And we must object to that and say, you know what, you must fix your countries. And there's this notion that people are generalizing all the time. Statistics are based on generalization all the time. You can never be precise to the point. And if, there are... Let me say this.
Because you said that you quoted the number, you said 20 million Nigerians. So when you're insisting on being factual, this is why I'm raising it.
I was just making an example that's saying, we cannot suffer, be it 20 million, be it 40 million, it's neither here nor there. But what I'm saying is that the number of people that went to exile, is compared to the people who are coming here. And people who are coming here, these are not Thomas Sankaras, these are not Julius Nyereres. They are people who are coming here to compete with our people. They want houses. You go to the east of Joburg, you go to Cape Town, these are people and who are not adding no value. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen Nigerians going to work? Where do they work?
But there are many professional Nigerians in this country who are in our industry.
I go to UNISA, I go to the University of KZN. Most of these guys who are coming here, they've got fake qualifications. They're not vetted from their countries. They're fake doctors. And we're supposed to be calm. We're supposed to keep calm. We're supposed to unite. We are told that we must unite. Funny enough, we are uniting in this country. We're not uniting in Nigeria. If we went to Nigeria, we went to Burkina Faso, all of us, with no visas, no papers, and we started selling drugs to their kids, inject them, kidnap them, I'm telling you, they will put us as at midnight.
Last week, we saw the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, pull out of the World Economic Forum on Africa, and Zambians deciding to boycott. Do you think that African leaders missed an opportunity to have a proper conversation on how a solution can be brought about collectively?
There's a global concern. As I was coming here, I was listening to the Human Rights Commissioner speaking about what is the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner speaking about what's happening in this country. There's a discussion at the diplomatic level with our embassy. Remember, our envoys, they interact with more than countries that were supposed to have participated here. So there is a dialogue around what's going on here and how we're addressing these issues. I'll be, as I regard myself always as a soldier, it would be insubordination to say Samora Machel really betrayed us. Samora Machel has been the fighter for liberation, inspired most of us to go into exile, advocate. I don't share that. I've been
Do you know Nkomati Peace Accord?
Oh yes, I've been at Samora Machel's house when he was still alive with Grasso Machel and the children, and we'll sing freedom songs. The Nkomati Accord was a strategic, in any war you have a strategic initiatives that you take to manage the conflict. Not only in Nkomati, Angola did the same. A lot of countries have signed agreements with the apartheid regime, but they kept on supporting us.
That's helping us.
They kept on supporting us. We were housed by them. They sacrificed. Samora Machel lost his life mainly because of his support for this country.
But this was with an end game. You were going to fight in a struggle and go back home to a free South Africa. What is the end game with the influx of foreign nationals coming into South Africa?
Remember, Desiree, as I said to you, this country was built on the sweat and blood of all Africans. Industrialization of South Africa took a lot of Africans. A lot of people sacrifice resources. Take Lesotho, a small kingdom, was surrounded by the racist regime to topple Jonathan Liabua and install their own puppet military regime there because he supported the liberation struggle. A lot of Basutus were killed in the process. It would be unfair, really, to say they never did anything for us when they sacrificed with their lives. Now, it's good to find a lot of peacetime revolutionaries who can shout revolutionary slogans. But there are people who sacrifice with their life, and I think we should honor those people.
Okay, let's talk about honoring those people. Desiree asked the question, what is the end game? Mr. Twala, I want to talk about young people. The young, yes, Advocate, we'll come to you in just a moment.
So I just want to come to this thing of what is the role of South Africa in a broader Africa? Remember, we speak about the consolidation of the African agenda. We are not an island. We're integrated within the African continent.
We're not an
Therefore,
island, but we're not the big brother.
we're not a big brother either. But we are a partner in dealing with issues and identifying problems. I mean, I have been a presidential envoy to Somalia, the most conflict area, a great deal of respect that people have shown for South Africa to help in providing solutions to the conflict. It's so huge. So we are an integral part of the continent,
Let's
and we
bring
need
in
to
Mr.
provide
Twala in the
solutions. We can't
conversation.
provide solution by pulling ourselves out.
Okay, so this is the question I wanted to ask then, and that is, if we are looking at the youth who are the biggest democratic dividend of the African continent, if you were to explain it, Mr. Twala, that we have foreign nationals in this country, some who have run away from their countries because of security reasons, some who have come here for a better life. But these are children who are then confronted with seeing their parents struggle. That battle of resources that Advocate Khumalo was speaking about. How do you then explain it to them about that bigger picture that Desiree was talking about? How do we preach harmony, but at the same time see a state that performs its responsibility, that of providing for its people?
I think Advocate said a number of things which I would agree with him. But in terms of us not finding peace and unite as Africans, I think that's fair for me. Not good. I'm an African, you know. My father is from Mozambique originally. And when I hear someone, you know, talking...
Hey, Chigo, you must go back then.
And chances are that's the case with most South Africans.
Yeah, my father, yeah, exactly. And, you know, most of us actually, you know, I have a friend.
Our origin can be traced back somewhere on the continent.
I have a friend who has a daughter with a Nigerian, you know. So, I mean, for me, to be honest with you, I'm really concerned if we're not going to talk peace. I mean, I was watching a documentary in Israel. Everyone is chasing black people outside. I mean, I thought Africa is for Africans, you know.
So how do you explain it to a young person?
Obviously, to be honest with you, I will... It's very difficult actually to explain to kids when we're actually not united. But my will be to actually talk peace. We must actually encourage our kids to actually love one another. Zambian, Nigerian, all of us, we need to actually encourage them to love one another. I wouldn't actually encourage my kids to actually look at the Zambian, Nigerian as an enemy.
It's
Definitely,
a special broadcast on SABC. We're having a conversation about the violence that's been taking place in the past few weeks and trying to figure out what the root causes are. Stay with us as we continue this conversation after this break.
Hello there, welcome to a special live broadcast here on SABC News Channel 404 and a very warm welcome to our viewers on SABC 3. We are in discussion with various stakeholders, co-anchoring here with my colleague Desiree Chauke about the various causes, the sources of xenophobic attacks and how as a country we should tackle it, how as a continent we should ensure that this is the last incident of what some have said has been 10 years of attacks on foreigners because of the battle of resources. But some even argue that attacks on foreigners have been a part of this country's history since as far back as 1986. But we'll talk about all of that and more. But first, let's take you back to Katlehong, where my colleague Maageketla Mohlabe is going to talk to us from a refugee center. Okay, so I understand that we won't be talking to Maageketla just yet, but it's been a special live broadcast for the past 3 hours, coming to you live from various parts of Gauteng. Stephen will be with you now in the studio to have a discussion with the leader of an African organization here in South Africa. Stephen?
What do you want me to do?
All right, so Desiree, it seems like we are not going to
have to do that one a bit later on. It's been quite a heated conversation here at Constitution Hill. We with advocate
I suppose that's why you have fire in the background,
I
right
know,
there.
Hey? Even though it's a fake fire. Which brings us to the conversation, back to this conversation about the fake stories that have been perpetuated about xenophobia, but we'll get to those later on in the show. Let me just re-welcome our guests, Advocate Ike Khumalo, and we have Dr. Chriselda Makwetla, and we have Mr. Chico Twala, who are talking to us about their different experiences of this phenomena. But Mr. Twala, let's start with you. You were talking about how a band, a South African band, that's usually fully booked throughout the year into different African countries, Mafikizolo, how their performances have been cancelled.
Not only Mafikizolo, I mean, our sector employs more than 2,000 artists, and they travel all over the world. And and Africa especially. I mean, Mafikizolo is huge in Africa. So you can imagine, you know, all their bookings, you know, being cancelled because we are labeled xenophobic and all these things. And we are not xenophobic. South Africans are not xenophobic. Hence I'm saying that the song that we're working on is to actually say to our African brothers and sisters, not all of us.
And there are very many influences from other parts of the continent in the music scene.
In the streets who are actually causing us, not South Africans are not xenophobic. We are not. We are actually, we love our brothers and sisters. And the fact that our musicians, this is affecting them, we have to actually do something about it.
Ike, do we love our brothers and sisters?
Let me tell you this. South African people have never been xenophobic. We welcome them. When they were free in the 50s, in the 60s, we welcomed them. They came to an apartheid country when they were free. You know, imagine that. And today our people are called thugs. It's like the good doctor says, they're peacetime revolutionaries. Some of us were active. We released Mandela. We ran the longest campaign, political campaign, release Mandela in 84, 85. You know, I was there. I was 13 when I was detained. So today we are told to shut up. You know, because we are thugs, we are criminals and all that. And we are not xenophobic. As South African people, what they're objecting to what the foreigners are doing
here. Okay, Everett Khumalo, please hold the thought. I must welcome now SABC 3 viewers and my colleague Maageketla Mohlabe, who is in Katlehong. He speaks to us from a refugee center. Maageketla, what is the scene, the situation where you are?
Good evening to you. As the visuals you see, actually, the visuals you are displaced since Wednesday. On the left-hand side of the screen, these are just some of the gentlemen playing here, playing soccer, trying to catch up. Of course, after that particular incident or that particular violence that actually made them to be where they are today, they are homeless. But of course, it's quite a different story inside. This is where we are going to actually see some of the families trying to reflect what happened Why are they here? Why is it that we see the incidents that are taking place in the streets of Johannesburg as well as the streets of Katlehong? They are all here. Of course, we know that is over 800 in total that have since been displaced ever since that particular incident. And of course, as you can see on my right-hand side, they're trying to make their bed, as well as their children, of course. Many of them, as you can see, they are with their children, making sure that they find a bit of rest. But these are emotional scenes, because they are telling me that they've never thought that they will find themselves in this situation. Many of them saying that they don't even know if some of their relatives are still alive, considering that here in Katlehong, we had over the past week that 2 people were burned to death in their shops, and this has really caused more tension in the area. And of course, others saying that they are trying to get in touch with their relatives, but they're not quite sure if they could be among the 12 people that we know have since passed on amid this particular violence. But joining me now is Kenias. Sir, thanks so much for your time. I mean, I can see that you are getting ready to go to sleep, and thanks so much for making this time for us. How has it really been to be here?
It has been a very difficult times, because as you know, in African setup, it is very difficult to live together, women and men plus children. It's a very difficult situation at the moment. It's like you are in a hell. So it's painful. Even you can see here as you have come at this place, you see there are a lot of young ones that are there, and we are sleeping on a floor, which is not a better way for young ones like these ones to live such a life.
But I know that you are here for a living, to make a living, to support your family back home in Malawi. But do you really wish to go back home? And if you were at home at this stage, what would be the circumstances there?
Yeah, we are willing to go home, but the thing is now we are in problem. The things that we have worked for, they have been bent. We have nothing at the moment. So it's like we are living with stress. We have nothing. We don't have any answers at the moment. But the thing is, we were preparing for ourselves when we go home that at least we should do something. Some of these people, they had their own properties. They could have started their own small businesses and done to earn a living, them with their families. So you see, in this situation, that means we are now desperate. We have nothing to do. We are just living. We don't have answers at the moment. It's like we don't know what will come next. So life is difficult for us here.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time. Kenya's Banda, one of the people that have since been displaced here. And of course, theirs is a story of pain. Theirs is a story of frustration. Theirs is a story that actually will probably be not forgotten in many years to come. And of course, young children, of course, having to experience what's happening in the street there is probably one of the tales that they will probably tell their future buddies or even their future friends as to what happened in South Africa, why they were once in this particular hall. But I understand that on the other side, the city of Ekurhuleni is doing its best to really locate some of those that are still homeless to provide them with shelter in order to stay safe. As I mentioned earlier on, police are actually monitoring the situation. We saw them, of course, in the streets of Ekurhuleni or even here in Katlehong, trying to make sure that there is order and we don't see this violence happen again.
Well, that's it from our colleague Maageketla Mohlabe, who's been at a refugee camp in Katlehong for most of this evening. But we're continuing our conversation here at Constitution Hill with our three guests. And I'm going to start again with Mr. Chico Twala. You're currently in the process of putting together a musical about xenophobia. Please tell us what made you decide to go this route. But what I'm curious about is the different issues that we have in South Africa, like gender-based violence, domestic violence, poverty. Why did you choose this particular issue above the others?
No, fortunately, we're actually tackling everything in the song. What you just spoke about, we're tackling everything. It's not only about the violence that we're seeing now in our country. I don't want to talk about xenophobia because we're not xenophobic. They can use that word, but definitely we're not. The song is obviously highlighting on all what we've just mentioned now. We're not actually talking about the violence only, but violence on human, trafficking, drugs, everything.
How do you hope that process will help South Africans? I imagine of how your song, We Miss You Manelo, while South Africa was anticipating the release of Nelson Mandela, brought together South Africans in the time of hope. Well, how are you hoping this particular project will impact society?
I think music plays a very important role in our sector to communicate with the masses. I mean, I did the peace song. If you remember the peace song, we also had the same problem where black on black violence in the township. And then we came various artists with the peace song, and it made a big difference. And I believe with this song, I mean, it's featuring Black Mambazo, Tsolo, all the cream of South African artists. I think people out there will be able to hear our voices. The only way for us to communicate is through music, nothing else.
But people are hungry, Ike?
Yes, people are hungry. You know, and we have a problem here in this country. You know, you mentioned the refugee camp, and I asked, you know, people, if they come here under the ticket of being refugees, you know, I look at Africa, which country is fighting, you know, for people to come here to be declared refugees? I look at Zimbabwe, there is no war. Botswana, there is no war. Burkina Faso, there is no war. Nigeria, there is no war. And people are coming here, abusing our systems, you know, becoming cheap laborers, undercutting prices, you know, out-competing our people. And we must keep quiet. It is unfortunate, like Brother Chico has mentioned, that Mafikizolo have been cancelled. It shows the vindictiveness of African leaders, you know, African continent. They want to put us under pressure so that they can dump their people here. You know, they have no social program. You go to Zimbabwe, they have no HIV program, no SARS, nothing. So what do they do? They dump their people here.
Are you suggesting that we deport foreign nationals who are illegal?
They must be deported.
How should we run that process?
We need a mass deportation because people who are coming here, you know, they are ruining our resources. Go to Joburg. You know, people have been broad daylight stabbed. You know. Stabbed in Small Street, you know. Remember Small Street? It used to be so beautiful. They're being stabbed by Zimbabwean criminals.
People are looking for solutions. This might be a bit of a drastic one, but practically, what can be done?
I think as a society, we need to pacify our language, how we interact with people, not politicians only, civil society leaders, influential community leaders. How we encourage people to be tolerant of each other and to be able to resolve our conflicts amicably. It does not mean that everything that we do, we must go to war. And I'm just worried if you find the vocabulary of us as a society, war is so dominant. War chart, war room, war on poverty. And if you look at the definition of war, it's contending by violence. Are we encouraging that? Are we pacifying that? Are we trying to pacify the side or encourage violence?
It's interesting that you should say that, Dr. Makwetla, because it said that xenophobia can exist without violence. A survey in 1997 finding that only a mere 6% of South Africans were positive about the presence of foreign nationals. A majority of that, 75% of South Africans, having negative perceptions about the presence of black African nationals in their country.
Listen, any conflict of identity has to do with the economics and politics. Economics, because we're all scrambling for meager resources. So it's quite easier to blame the next person. That's why I'm saying if we start to look at foreign nationals, we're going to look at each other from our tribal cocoons.
As we saw in 1992 in Katoras.
Not 1992, go during the local government elections here. When an ANC candidate was running for mayoral position in Tshwane, people were saying she's not from here. She must go to KZN. She's a South African. She can contest for election. So we're starting to degenerate, and that's why I'm saying it's very important for leaders in civil society to be responsible in the language we use, because once we start to unleash the differences, tribal, ethnicity, we're not going to be able to control the situation.
So, Mr.
we need to
Khumalo,
start being responsible from now
Can
as a
I
society.
ask you this? Those South Africans who, as Chico mentioned earlier, he has a friend who has a child with a Nigerian, who have elected to start families with people from different countries. How do you have that conversation with them about chasing them out?
Let me say this. South Africans, when they go to foreign countries, they behave, they adhere to the laws of those countries. They don't go there and misbehave. And we can't suffer because of two people decide to have children outside. You know, we can't suffer, you know, because we want to play soccer with Zambia and they're denying us soccer. So therefore we must sacrifice our country. We must open our country, you know. And for Africa or the rest of the continent to send their people here and say, we helped you. Let me say this, Germans, they've contributed when industries, Japanese, they put Toyota. Do you see Japanese here? Only come these guys who are opportunists. They say we helped you, and they never helped us. What is it that they've helped us with?
The irony of what you're saying, though, Advocate Khumalo, we're broadcasting here from Constitution Hill, which is the bedrock, the legal instrument that allows for freedom of expression, freedom of existence. So when you say we can't suffer because of two people who have children with outsiders or foreign nationals, are we not going back? Are we not regressing, taking away that freedom of choice?
No. People can choose to do whatever. If my sister marries a Nigerian, they go live in Nigeria, you know, it's fine. You know, it's fine in this scenario. It's only the they're following Bomakoti. They're coming into this country. I've never heard of such. It's not African. But anyway, coming to the constitution of this country, you know, it only happens here, where the constitution does not define the people. As South Africans, it says everyone has got a right to health care. Everyone has got a right to adequate houses. Other constitution, they tell you a German, and then it becomes difficult to become a German, an American. You know, ours, once you've jumped the border, when you are pregnant, you are now South African.
I beg to
we are
say
everyone.
We have different histories, though.
No, the buildings. This constitution, it has made us to suffer the most. Building hijacking. When people hijack buildings, you can no longer remove them because they will tell you that they've got children, they've got rights, they've got, you know, you must find them alternative accommodation. People who came here illegal. No, this constitution is very liberal and it must be altered.
Is it not a fair point, though, Dr. Makwetla, to say that the state has failed its people in being very specific about who is an inhabitant of who's a beneficiary of this democracy, of this constitution? Is the state not failing to live up to its responsibility?
Well, let's reverse what the learned advocate is saying. Why should two people suffer? Two people. But why? Let's use the same analogy. Why would we generalize two bad apples from Nigeria who happen to be involved in drugs to generalize 150 or 200 million people? I think that's totally unfair. If you look at the number of people who are doing wrong things and the number of good people who are doing good things around the world, not only in South Africa, around the world. Nigerians are involved in peacekeeping around the world. They're involved in a lot of operation, humanitarian things around the world. To generalize because of two people, and I think I agree with you, Tsepiso, that let's not attach nationality to crime. Crime is a crime.
Maybe
it doesn't matter who commits it.
Let me reverse the question. Those two people, why must those two people suffer at the hands of African state because South Africans are cleaning their country?
No, South Africa, we're not cleaning our country, and I don't think we are about to clean the country. That's a very dangerous language.
I'm listening, you know, when you say clean our country, I'm thinking of Rwanda.
Exactly, that's what I wanted to say to you.
They said clean our country of cockroaches.
Yeah.
I've never said cockroaches.
No, but I'm saying, we're talking about the violence in
Nobody condones violence. People say, like, you know, we must get rid of, like, you know, all the illegalities. And I'm very disturbed. You know, a man in Pretoria is being killed, you know, by a foreigner. Where is the moral outcry? Corey Sanders is killed. Lucky Dube is killed by foreigners involved. Where is the moral outcry? It seems as if this moral outcry is always one-sided. When people raise issues, when you have been killed at night, you know, by people who are not supposed to be here, raped, and there is no moral outcry.
So what do you think about the efforts to separate the criminal activity from the general activity of people coming into the country?
I'll tell you this. I remember 5 years back, Statistics South Africa, they said out of 10 Nigerians, only 1 is not involved in crime. And from empirical evidence, from what I know, I ask you a simple question. I go to Pick n Pay, I go to Tsolo, I go to every garages. Where do Nigerians work?
No, let's.
They're all running businesses, import, export.
Dr. Makwetla, what is the best way for South Africans to repay the solidarity of Africa?
Well, we don't have to repay. The continent doesn't owe us anything. But we need to become a reliable partner in building this continent and understand that our life and our livelihood is intricately linked to that of the entire continent. And once we understand that, we'll then be able to see our role within the continent. We benefit a lot from the continent.
They do benefit from us.
As a person in leadership, how should we extricate the criminal elements?
We should deal with criminals as criminals. And I agree with what Tsepiso raised earlier on. They don't put national identity to crime. I find it very difficult. I watch this trial of Omotoso in Port Elizabeth, and the media goes and say Nigerian Omotoso. Why do we say Nigerian pastor? Why don't we say this person, Omotoso, who is accused of this kind of crime? Why do we attach any nationality? And I think there's a message that we send to the general people. When we see people acting in the manner in which they're acting, we ask ourselves a question. That's why I'm saying we have to be responsible in terms of the language of our communication, because we have a great deal of influence.
But as a racially divided nation, as an ethnically divided nation, is this not part of our vocabulary that it finds its way into people discriminating in such a manner?
But Tsepiso, that's why I'm saying, as leaders in different formation in the society, we need to exercise some level of responsibility and understanding that whatever we communicate, the words we use, they find some resonance in ordinary people. So we got to be very responsible in how we deal with things.
Can I say this? People come into this country, they call themselves Israeli mafia, Pakistani mafia, bread mafia. We will call them by what they call themselves. And I can say this, the MEC of Gauteng, when he says, according to their statistics, when a crime happens in a particular way, they know which nationality has committed that. If somebody has been cut his throat, they know that probably chances is a Zimbabwean. When there's drug involved, human trafficking, child prostitution, they know. It's like these criminals, they sit somewhere in a board and subdivide themselves and say, you take the bouncing industry, you take the bread mafia, you take, like we come to fake products. You know you'll find the Somali, you know you'll find the Pakistani.
Mr. Tsolo, you are in the business of using language to convey messages. What's your take on the conversation about developing a different way of talking?
Yeah, can't we separate criminality and I mean there are a lot of I think I've been listening to the conversation here. We're talking about crime and
you're part of it, you're not listening to it.
Yes,
you're taking part in
yes, I'm part of it. Yeah.
He's in political no man's land.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that I think it's important that, you know, we must sort out our borders, number one, you know, to avoid the mess that we're in now in terms of...
We're in a mess.
Huh?
We are in a mess.
Yeah, we are in a mess. I think it's important because everything starts there. I mean, 2-3 weeks back, the police were confiscating goods from foreigners and all that.
Including cities.
I think they would have, if they've stopped those goods coming from the borders, we wouldn't actually be having the situation that we're experiencing now, because it started on that day. If you can recall, it started on the day when foreigners were attacking our police, and most South Africans got angry and all that, you know.
But the problem now is we have South Africans now attacking South Africans.
Which is wrong. Yes, we've seen that, but...
it's indiscriminate now.
No, listen. I would have a problem. You remember there was this infamous South African with dreadlocks who was arrested with drugs in Thailand.
Yes.
Should all South Africans who visit Thailand be seen as potential drug dealers? The answer is no. And that's why we need to refuse that. You see, the Thais, they never attach permanent nationality to regard every South African as a potential drug dealer.
Because it will take them 20 years until they arrest another South African. But we arrest Nigerians time and again.
Advocate, that's why I'm saying...
It will take 20 years before you see another South African.
We shouldn't do that. We should refuse to do that as a society.
Dr. Makwetla, you don't think perhaps there's a level of denialism in wanting not to deal with the facts that are before us, that on a regular basis, Nigerians do get arrested for peddling in drugs?
Well, Desiree, I have never seen an empirical research that shows people who are in prison that we are having within our prisons, the majority of them are Nigerians, and they are involved in drugs. I've never seen that kind of an evidence. So I think what we are saying, it's attaching a stigma to a country that plays an important role within the continent. And I think that's unfair, because...
Let's talk then about the events of the past few days. How have they resonated with you?
Very badly. I can tell you, our behavior is a result of the communication and the language, and that's why I'm pleading with my fellow panelists here that even us, as we're sitting around here, a lot of people within the continent are watching this show. It's very important to communicate a responsible message, and a responsible message to citizens who must exercise their responsibility in terms of interacting with other people.
I'm strongly disappointed. This condemnation is always one-sided. In Nigeria now, I mean, they're stoning our companies. I don't see the moral outcry.
Okay, perhaps let's go back to the original discussion. We were talking about xenophobic sentiment. Yes. We're talking about criminality. So our country is faced with both realities. And the fact that you've had organizations, NGO organizations, that are being formed in opposition to xenophobic sentiment, but also attacks by foreigners on South Africans, and that battle of resources means that there is a problem. How is the country going to fix this?
Let me tell you, if you go to any country now, go to Nigeria, as we are using Nigeria, you're going to find Nigerians who are involved in crime within their own country.
That's their own country, but not in our country.
Yeah. I'm saying the crime phenomenon is not an exclusive ownership of a particular country.
No, but if the state were living up to its responsibility, that of protecting its citizen, is it not possible that it would reduce the tensions?
No, we have to protect citizens against any form of crime. I agree with you, Tsepiso. Don't renege on that. You've been fantastic. That you cannot attach nationality to crime. Crime is a crime. And we have to deal with crime on its own merit. Once we start dealing with that, you then stop stigmatizing nations, stigmatizing countries, because it's basically not factual. There's no research that has shown that within the prison communities, most of people who are there are foreigners. I can bet you most of the people will likely be South Africans.
No, we are talking per capita. We are talking per capita. But anyway,
what are the origins of this deep dislike that you have?
No, I don't dislike
for people who are different from you.
I don't dislike
don't look
them.
like you.
I'm saying our laws must be implemented. You know, even when you go to jail, they'll search you. But you know, but in this country, somebody jumps the border. You know, we don't ask whether this person was a mercenary, was a murderer. We don't check, we don't vet.
Where is South African Ubuntu in all of this?
No. Ubuntu doesn't mean that, you know, we must welcome everyone, you know, who's coming here. People have been they've been involved in war crimes. They come here, we're not vetting them. They are terrorists. They're coming here, they're now threatening us, and we must fold our arms. No, Ubuntu doesn't mean that, you know.
No, but advocate, you're not being fair to the country. this country, we don't admit war criminals. Anyone who has been indicted for war criminals.
The government admits that they don't know how many foreign nationals are here. They don't know who's here.
War
But
criminals,
seemingly the government doesn't know everyone who's here.
but no, let's speak about war criminals. Once you start calling somebody a war criminal, they've been indicted by a court of law. Not by a court of public opinion.
Suspected war criminals, it makes you happy.
You see, you are a lawyer advocate. Now, I'm saying we must communicate responsibly to people, because once we start telling our people that we are admitting terrorists, we're admitting war criminals,
okay,
you're going to see this kind of behavior.
Let's ask you to do this, Dr. Makwetla. Speak responsibly to the people of South Africa, saying, yes, we are aware of the hardships that you are enduring, and we are fixing it. Where do you start?
3 minutes left.
We can't blame other people for our hardships. We are masters of our own destiny. We must decide how we fix our economic situation. We must encourage our people to behave in a particular way. I mean, look at this femicide that we're seeing within the country, largely committed by us South Africans. We must start to deal with those issues.
Africa, let's unite. Let's unite and fight drugs. I think drug lords must be given must get a harsh sentence. I think that's the biggest problem that we have. More than that, nothing. But definitely, drugs are the biggest problem.
Ike, your closing words?
Yeah, I'll tell you this. He's applying a textbook in a situation that does not need a textbook.
We need everything we can get.
Yeah, that's the problem, you see, with educated people. You know, they misdiagnose the situation and say, oh, I'm a doctor, I'm an advocate.
You didn't do that.
I suspect that clever black syndrome is creeping into this conversation, and that's how we must surely end it. Thank you very much. Very entertaining discussion. And the end of our broadcast here at Constitution Hill, our special broadcast. Desiree?
It's been a blast. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.
Thanks indeed.
You see, when I drive out here, somebody points a gun.
Well, Tsepiso and Desiree, thank you very much indeed for your contribution to our special broadcast Behind the Violence tonight. Thanks also, of course, to the rest of the team, Maageketla, Mohlabe and Chriselda Lewis, who have been with you. You'll be able to go back and watch the special broadcast on SABCnews.com. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Have a good night.